My millionaire sister happened to find me sleeping under a bridge, homeless, exhausted, forgotten. After she learned that my children had abused me, stolen my house, and thrown me out like yesterday's trash, she bought me a beachfront condo and gave me $8 million to start my life over. A few days later, my children showed up smiling, flowers in hand, thinking I was their golden ticket, but she saw right through them, and so did I. Before I tell you how I destroyed their lives, let me show you how they destroyed mine. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments if you have ever been betrayed by the people you loved the most. I want to know I am not alone. The baton dug into my ribs, sharp and unforgiving. It was 3 in the morning under the I-85 overpass in Atlanta, and the cold had settled into my bones like a permanent guest. "Get up, old man, you can't sleep here." The officer's voice was young, impatient. He didn't see a 72-year-old man who had built skyscrapers in this city with his own 2 hands. He just saw a nuisance, a black man in a dirty coat taking up space. I tried to sit up, but my joints locked. "I am not bothering anyone, officer," I wheezed. "This is my home now." "Home?" The officer laughed, a cruel bark of a sound. "This is state property. Move along before I book you for vagrancy." He raised the baton again, ready to prod me like cattle. I closed my eyes, bracing for the indignity. I was Isaiah Freeman. I was Zeke to my friends. I had been a father, a husband, a provider. Now I was just something to be swept away. The concrete beneath me was damp, leaching the little warmth I had left in my frail body. My stomach twisted empty for the second day in a row. I could still smell the faint, lingering scent of the lavender detergent Tiffany used on the sheets in the guest room I used to occupy. That smell was a ghost now replaced by the stench of urine exhaust fumes and wet cardboard. I remembered the day they threw me out. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't an explosion. It was a Tuesday. Dante, my son, the boy I had raised alone after his mother passed, the boy I had put through college by breaking my back on construction sites, had told me we were going for a drive. Tiffany, his wife, sat in the passenger seat, scrolling on her phone, barely acknowledging my existence. I thought we were going to the doctor. I thought they cared. I fell asleep in the back seat, lulled by the motion of the car and the strange sweet tea Tiffany had insisted I drink before we left. When I woke up, I was on the sidewalk. My bags were gone, my wallet was gone, and there was a note pinned to my jacket. "This man has Alzheimer's. He is aggressive. Do not return him. He belongs to the streets." I didn't have Alzheimer's. I never did. They stole my mind on paper so they could steal my life in reality. They wanted the house, my house, the house I paid for brick by brick, and now 3 months later, here I was shivering under a bridge while a police officer threatened to arrest me for the crime of existing. "I am moving," I whispered, trying to push myself up. My hands were raw, the skin cracked from the cold. I scrambled to gather the few pathetic belongings I had scavenged: a half-empty water bottle, a newspaper I used for insulation, a blanket that smelled of mold. Too slow, the officer snapped. He kicked my cardboard mattress, sending my water bottle skittering into the darkness. I said, "Move. I don't want to see you here when I come back around in 10 minutes. He walked away, his boots crunching on the gravel, leaving me alone in the shadows. I leaned back against the concrete pillar, tears freezing on my cheeks. I was tired. I was so tired. Maybe it would be better if I just didn't wake up. Maybe Dante was right. Maybe I was just dead weight. Suddenly, a beam of light cut through the darkness, blinding white and intense. I shielded my eyes, expecting another patrol car, expecting the cuffs. But the engine didn't sound like a police cruiser. It purred, a low, powerful rumble that vibrated in my chest. A car pulled up to the curb, ignoring the filth and the trash. It wasn't just a car. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek and black, sitting there like a panther in the mud. The contrast was violent. The ultimate symbol of wealth parked in the middle of absolute poverty. The rear door opened. I watched mesmerized as a pair of Italian heels stepped out onto the cracked pavement, ignoring the grime. Then came the cane ebony with a silver handle, and finally Viola, my sister. I hadn't seen Viola in 5 years. We had drifted apart not out of anger, but out of circumstance. She had climbed the ladder of Atlanta real estate, becoming a shark in a tank of minnows, while I stayed humble, content with my pension and my family. I thought she had forgotten me. I thought everyone had forgotten me. At 75, she still walked with the spine of a queen and the eyes of a hawk. She wore a floor-length fur coat that probably cost more than the officer's annual salary. Her silver hair was pulled back in an immaculate bun. She looked out of place like a diamond dropped in a sewer. The police officer, seeing the car, turned back around. He walked over, his hand resting on his holster, his face confused. "Ma'am, you can't park here," he said, his voice losing its earlier aggression but still firm. "This area isn't safe." Viola didn't even look at him. She walked straight toward me, her eyes locked on my face. "Officer, step back from my brother," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of iron. It was the voice of a woman who was used to being obeyed instantly. The policeman froze, his baton hovering in midair. He looked at the car, then at the woman, then at me, the heap of rags on the ground. "Your brother," he stammered. "Ma'am, this is a vagrant. He has been squatting here for—" "He is not a vagrant." Viola cut him off, turning to face him. Her eyes flashed with a cold, dangerous fire. "He is Isaiah Freeman, and if you touch him again, if you even look at him the wrong way, I will have your badge on my desk before sunrise. Do you know who I am?" The officer swallowed hard. He looked at the Rolls-Royce again. He looked at the driver, who had stepped out, a massive man with arms like tree trunks, standing silently by the door. The power dynamic had shifted. The badge meant nothing here. Money was the only authority that mattered. "No, ma'am," the officer whispered, taking a step back. "I didn't know." "Now you do," Viola said, dismissing him as if he were a fly. She turned back to me. Her expression softened just a fraction, but she didn't pity me. Viola Freeman didn't do pity. She extended a gloved hand. "Get up, Zeke," she said, using the nickname only she and my late wife used. "We are leaving." I looked at her hand. It was clean, pristine. My hand was filthy, caked with the grime of the streets. I hesitated. I croaked, my voice raspy from disuse. I am dirty. I smell." She didn't flinch. She leaned down, grabbing my hand with a strength that surprised me. "You are a free man," she said fiercely. "Dirt washes off. Dignity is forever. Now get in the car." I took her hand. It was warm. For the first time in 3 months, I felt warmth. I let her pull me up. My legs trembled, but I stood. I left the cardboard box. I left the shame. I left the memory of the officer's baton. The driver opened the back door for me. I sank into the soft leather seats, the smell of expensive cologne and new car enveloping me. It was a sensory overload. The heater was running, blowing gentle, warm air against my frozen skin. The door shut with a solid thud, sealing out the noise, the cold, and the world that had rejected me. Viola settled in beside me. The car began to move, gliding smoothly over the potholes that I had slept on. I watched the underpass fade into the distance, a concrete tomb I had narrowly escaped. The silence inside the car was heavy. I waited for her to hug me, to ask me how I ended up here, to cry with me. But Viola was a businesswoman first, and a sister second. She didn't offer a hug. She reached into the seat pocket and pulled out a hot towel and an iPad. "Clean your face, Zeke," she said, handing me the towel. I wiped the grime from my cheeks, the steam loosening the dirt that felt tattooed onto my skin. It felt like I was wiping away a mask. "Why, Vi?" I asked, lowering the towel. "Why did you come?" She looked out the window as the city lights blurred past us, heading toward the wealthy skyline of Buckhead. "Because you are my blood, Zeke," she said simply, "and because I found out what they did to you." She tapped the screen of the iPad and handed it to me. "Watch this," she said. I looked down. It was a video. Grainy black and white, but clear enough. It was footage from a security camera. I recognized the location immediately. It was the drop-off point near the shelter on the west side, the place where 3 months ago I had woken up confused and alone. I pressed play. And as I watched, the numbness in my heart began to crack, replaced by a fire I hadn't felt in years. I saw my car, I saw my son, and I saw the truth. The silence inside the Rolls-Royce was heavier than the concrete pillars I had just left behind. It was a vacuum sucking the air out of my lungs, replacing the stench of the streets with the scent of expensive leather and climate-controlled air. I sat there, the hot towel Viola had given me growing cold in my hands, the dirt on my face turning into a muddy smear. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to see the pity in my big sister's eyes, the woman who had conquered Atlanta while I had just been trying to keep my head above water. But when I finally turned to her, I didn't find pity. I found a cold, simmering rage that mirrored the steel in her spine. She wasn't looking at me like a victim. She was looking at me like a witness to a crime. Viola reached into her designer bag, the leather creaking softly in the quiet cabin. She pulled out an iPad, the screen dark and reflective like a black mirror. She held it out to me, her manicured hand steady as a rock. "Take it, Zeke," she said, her voice low and devoid of the warmth I remembered from our childhood. "You need to see this. You need to understand that what happened to you wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a mistake. It was an execution." I took the device. My fingers calloused and trembling fumbled with the sleek metal. I didn't want to look. A part of me, the part that was still a father, wanted to throw it out the window and pretend that my son, my Dante, had just made a mistake, that he was looking for me, that he loved me. But the look on Viola's face told me that hope was a lie. I pressed the power button. The screen flared to life, blinding me for a second. It wasn't a movie. It was security footage. The timestamp in the corner read November 14th, 8:45 p.m. It was the night my life ended, though I hadn't known it then. The camera angle was high, looking down into a kitchen I knew better than the back of my hand. It was my kitchen. The granite countertops I had installed myself. The oak cabinets I had sanded and stained. Standing there bathed in the harsh light of the refrigerator was Tiffany, my daughter-in-law. She looked impatient. She was tapping her foot, her acrylic nails clicking against a ceramic mug. I zoomed in. I watched as she opened a small cabinet above the stove, a cabinet where we kept the heavy-duty sleeping pills I had been prescribed after my wife passed, pills I never took because I was afraid of not waking up. She shook 203 of them into her palm. She crushed them with the back of a spoon, a methodical grinding motion that made my stomach turn. She swept the powder into the mug and poured steaming water over it, stirring it with a vigorous, angry energy. Then she added honey. Lots of honey. To mask the bitterness. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered that cup of tea. I remembered her bringing it to me in the living room, a smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "Here, Dad," she had said. "This will help your cough." I had thanked her. I had thanked the woman who was poisoning me. The video jumped forward. 9:30 p.m. The camera switched to the driveway. My son Dante walked into the frame. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He was wringing his hands, his shoulders hunched, pacing back and forth by the rear door of his car. He looked terrified, but not terrified enough to stop what was happening. He looked weak. Then the back door of the house opened. Tiffany emerged, struggling under my weight. In the video, I was limp, my feet dragging on the pavement, my head lolling against her shoulder. I looked like a corpse. Dante rushed over, but he didn't stop her. He didn't scream for help. He grabbed my legs. My own son. The boy I had carried on my shoulders to watch the parades on Auburn Avenue, the boy I had held when he scraped his knees, was now carrying me like a rolled-up carpet. They shoved me into the back seat of the car. Dante looked around, his eyes wide, scanning the darkness for neighbors, for witnesses. He was trembling so hard I could see it on the grainy footage. He got into the driver's seat. Tiffany got in the passenger side. She checked her makeup in the rearview mirror. She checked her makeup while her father-in-law lay drugged and helpless in the back. The video cut again. The timestamp now read 10:15 p.m. The location had changed. It was a street camera, gritty and low quality, pointed at a desolate stretch of road under the I-85 bridge. The area was a graveyard of abandoned shopping carts and wet trash. The car pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the gloom. The back door opened. This was the hardest part. I watched as my son dragged me out onto the wet concrete. He didn't place me down gently. He dropped me. My head bounced against the pavement. I flinched in the Rolls Royce, feeling the phantom pain in my skull. Dante stood over me for a second, his hand covering his mouth, looking down at the father who had given him everything. For a split second, I thought he might break. I thought he might pick me up and put me back in the car. But then Tiffany walked into the frame. She was wearing a long coat and gloves. She didn't look at my face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of paper and a roll of tape. She crouched down, not to check my pulse, not to see if I was breathing, but to tape the note to my chest. She smoothed it out with a firm hand, making sure it would stick. I paused the video and zoomed in on the note. The letters were thick, black marker strokes. "This man has Alzheimer's. He is aggressive. Do not return him." Lies. Vicious, calculated lies. I didn't have Alzheimer's. My mind was sharp. They had stolen my sanity on paper so they could steal my assets in reality. They had labeled me a discarded object, a broken thing that no one would want to touch. I pressed play again. The final seconds of the footage were the knife in the heart. Tiffany stood up. She looked at her handiwork at the old man lying in the dirt, and she dusted her hands off on her coat. It was a gesture of finality, a gesture that said, "I am done with this chore." Then she turned to Dante, grabbed his lapel and pulled him close. She said something to him. I couldn't hear it, but I could see her face. She was smiling. She laughed, a cold, victorious laugh that seemed to echo in the silent car. They got back in the vehicle. The taillights flared red, two demon eyes in the darkness, and then they sped away, leaving me alone in the cold, surrounded by the indifference of the city I had helped build. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, the iPad heavy in my lap. My mind tried to reject what I had just seen. It tried to tell me that it was a deep fake, a trick, a nightmare. But the ache in my joints was real. The memory of the tea was real. The cold was real. A sound escaped my throat, a low, guttural keen that sounded like an animal in a trap. It wasn't a cry. It was something deeper. It was the sound of a heart breaking not into two pieces, but into dust. I felt tears, hot and stinging, track through the grime on my face. I wept for the boy I had raised. I wept for the sacrifices I had made, the double shifts, the skipped meals, the years of loneliness, so he wouldn't feel the lack of a mother. I had poured my life into him, drop by drop, and he had poured me into the gutter. Denial washed away, replaced by an agony so physical I doubled over, clutching my chest. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was a physical weight crushing my lungs, my son, my blood. He hadn't just abandoned me. He had erased me. He had looked at me and decided I was worth less than the house I lived in. He had chosen a woman who hated me over the father who loved him. But as the tears fell, something else began to rise beneath the pain. It started as a spark, a small ember in the ash of my grief. It was heat, it was fire, it was hate. I looked at the black screen of the iPad, seeing my own reflection. The broken old man was fading. In his place was a man who had survived Jim Crow, a man who had survived poverty, a man who had survived the death of his wife. They thought they had buried me. They thought I was a corpse. But they forgot that you don't bury a man like Isaiah Freeman unless you are sure he is dead. I wiped my face with the rough towel, scrubbing away the tears until my skin burned. I sat up straight. The leather of the seat creaked as I adjusted my posture. I looked out the window at the passing lights of the city where my son was sleeping in my bed, probably dreaming of the money he thought he had won. Viola hadn't said a word. She had let me break. She knew I needed to break so I could be forged into something harder. Now she turned to me. Her eyes were dry, dark pools of ancient strength. She reached out and took the iPad from my hands, setting it aside. She leaned forward, her voice a whisper that carried the force of a hurricane. "So Zeke, you have seen the truth. You have seen the devil's evidence. Now I need to know." She paused, letting the question hang in the air between us. "What do you want to do?" I looked at her. I looked at my sister, the millionaire, the shark. And for the first time in my life, I felt like a shark too. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want reconciliation. Those were things for families, and I didn't have a family anymore. I had enemies. I took a deep breath, the air in the car tasting of vengeance. "I want them to suffer, Vi." I said, my voice steady, cold as the grave they tried to put me in. "I don't want to just survive. I want to take everything. I want them to feel the cold I felt. I want them to feel the hunger. I want them to look at me and know that they threw away the only thing that could have saved them." I looked back at the city skyline, my eyes narrowing. I want them to pay, and I want to be the one who collects the debt. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was a journey between two different worlds. With every floor we passed, I felt the gravity of the streets, the weight of the mud and the cold concrete falling away from me. The doors opened with a soft chime that sounded like a church bell signaling the end of a long, dark service. I stepped out, not into a room, but into a sanctuary of glass and marble that hovered above the city of Atlanta like a cloud. The air up here smelled expensive. It smelled of white tea and cedar, a sharp contrast to the stench of urine and exhaust fumes that had filled my lungs for the last 3 months. Viola didn't say a word. She simply pointed toward a hallway that seemed to stretch on for miles. "The master bath is on the left," she said. Take your time, Zeke. Wash the world off you. I walked into the bathroom. It was larger than the entire house my son had stolen from me. The floors were heated, radiating a gentle warmth that seeped through the soles of my worn-out shoes. I stripped off the filthy clothes, the layers of rags I had scavenged from dumpsters to keep from freezing. They fell to the floor in a heap, a shedding of skin that I kicked into the corner with a sudden violent revulsion. I stepped into the shower. It wasn't just a shower, it was a rainfall of hot water that hit me from every angle. I turned the temperature up as high as I could stand, letting the scalding heat burn the memory of the winter chill out of my marrow. The water swirled around my feet, turning dark gray, then brown, carrying away the grime of the underpass. I scrubbed until my skin was raw and pink. I scrubbed as if I could wash away the feeling of Dante's hands dragging me out of the car. When I finally stepped out and wiped the steam from the mirror, I stopped. The man staring back at me was a stranger. My beard was overgrown gray and matted. My cheeks were hollow, but it was the body that told the story. I traced the lines of my reflection with a trembling finger. I looked at the jagged white scar running down my left shoulder. I got that pouring the foundation for the chaotic highway expansion in '92. It was a double shift. I was exhausted, but Dante needed braces. I worked 3 weeks of overtime to pay for that smile of his. I touched the gnarled knuckle on my right hand, the one that never quite straightened out after I broke it, stopping a heavy beam from crushing a younger worker. That was the year I bought Tiffany her first car because she said the bus wasn't safe for a pregnant woman. Every scar on my body was a receipt. Every ache in my joints was a testament to a sacrifice I had made for my family. I was a map of labor, a geography of love given and taken for granted. They looked at these scars and saw a broken-down old workhorse ready for the glue factory. They didn't see that these scars were armor. They proved I could survive anything. Even them. I found a razor on the sink. I shaved off the beard. I trimmed the hair. Slowly, stroke by stroke, Isaiah Freeman emerged from the wreckage of the homeless man. I wasn't just cleaning up. I was preparing for war. When I walked back out into the living area, wrapped in a plush robe that felt like a cloud, Viola was waiting. She sat on a white leather sofa that faced the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Atlanta skyline glittered below us, a sea of diamonds on black velvet. She didn't look at me. She was looking at a thick leather folder on the marble coffee table. Next to it sat a small rectangular object that caught the light. "Sit down, Zeke," she said, her voice soft but commanding. I sat. The leather of the chair sighed under my weight. "Do you remember 40 years ago?" she asked, still looking at the city. "When Mama died and left us those parcels of land down in South Atlanta? It was nothing but scrub brush and red dirt back then. You told me you didn't want it. You said you were a builder, not a landlord. You signed your half over to me and told me to do whatever I wanted with it." I nodded. I remembered. I was young, strong, and foolish. I thought I could build my fortune with a hammer and sweat. I didn't understand the value of ownership. "I kept it," Zeke, Viola said, turning to face me. "I didn't sell it. I developed it. I waited. I watched the city grow. I built apartments. I built strip malls. And when the market exploded, I sold some and reinvested the rest. But I never forgot whose name was on the original deed." She slid the leather folder across the table toward me. "I created a trust," she said. "The Phoenix Trust. Half of every dime that land made went into it. I invested it for you. I compounded it. I protected it." I opened the folder. My eyes scanned the documents, the rows of numbers, the legal jargon. And then I saw the bottom line, the total value of the assets, $8,450,000. The air left my lungs. I stared at the number. It didn't look real. It looked like a phone number. It looked like a mistake. "Vi," I whispered, This is too much. I am a simple man. I fix things. I don't—" "You are a rich man, Isaiah." She cut me off, her voice sharp. "You have always been a rich man. You just didn't have access to the bank account. This isn't charity. This is your birthright. This is the harvest of the seeds you planted and forgot about." She picked up the small object next to the folder and held it out. It was a card, heavy, black, metal. An American Express Centurion card. The black card. The myth. "Take it," she said. I reached out. My hand hovered over it. This card represented everything I had taught myself not to need. It represented excess. It represented power. It represented the kind of people who looked down on men like me. For 72 years, I had counted pennies. I had clipped coupons. I had saved jars of coins. I had lived with the constant low-level anxiety of a man who knows he is one missed paycheck away from disaster. And now I held a piece of metal that could buy the building I used to live in. The conflict warred inside me. The old Isaiah, the humble deacon, the hard worker, wanted to push it away. He wanted to say that money was the root of all evil, that it had corrupted my son and destroyed my family. But then I thought about the bridge. I thought about the cold concrete. I thought about Tiffany laughing as she dusted her hands off after dumping me like trash. Humble Isaiah died under that bridge, I thought. He was too weak to survive this world. I took the card. It was cool to the touch. It felt heavy like a loaded gun. This accounts for the money, Viola said, watching me closely. But it doesn't account for the debt they owe you. She leaned forward, her eyes dark and serious. I have the police commissioner on speed dial, Zeke. I can make one call. We can have them arrested for kidnapping, for elder abuse, for fraud. We can have them in a cell by sunrise. They will lose the house, they will lose their jobs, and they will rot in prison for 10 years. It is the clean way. It is the legal way. I looked down at the black card in my hand. I ran my thumb over the raised letters of my name, Isaiah Freeman. Prison. I said, testing the word. Prison is shelter, Vi. Prison is 3 meals a day. Prison is a bed. It might be hard, but it is a life. I looked up at her. The reflection of the city lights danced in my eyes, cold and unyielding. If we send them to prison, they become victims. They will tell everyone they were misunderstood. They will blame the system. They will never understand what it felt like to be me. They will never know the terror of being erased. Viola tilted her head. So, what do you want to do? I clenched the card in my fist. I don't want to arrest them. I said, my voice steady and low. I want to hunt them. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the tiny cars moving through the arteries of the city. Somewhere down there, Dante was sleeping in my bed. Tiffany was walking through my kitchen. They were comfortable. They felt safe. They thought they had won. I want to play a game, Vi, I said, turning back to her. I want to dangle this money in front of them like a piece of raw meat in front of a starving dog. I want to watch them dance for it. I want to watch them humiliate themselves for it. I want to give them hope, beautiful, blinding hope. And then I want to snatch it away and watch the light go out in their eyes. Viola smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile that matched my own. Cat and mouse, she said. No, I corrected her. Cat and rat. Because that is what they are. Rats who bit the hand that fed them. I slipped the black card into the pocket of my robe. I am going to buy a suit tomorrow, Vi. The most expensive suit in Atlanta. And then I am going to let them find me. I am going to let them think I am a senile old man who stumbled into a fortune. And when they try to take it, I am going to close the trap. Viola poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. She handed one to me. To the Phoenix Trust, she said, raising her glass. I clinked my glass against hers. The sound rang out clear and sharp as a bell tolling for a funeral. To the hunt, I said. And I drank. The amber liquid in my glass was smooth, but it did nothing to warm the cold knot in my stomach as I walked into the study. Viola called it the war room, and I could see why. The walls were lined with mahogany bookshelves, but the center of the room was dominated by a massive table covered in documents, photographs, and blueprints. The air here was different. It didn't smell like home. It smelled like strategy. It smelled like blood in the water. 2 men stood up as I entered. Viola introduced them not as employees, but as weapons. Marcus was the lawyer, a young black man with a suit that cost more than my son's car, and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. He was sharp, hungry, and lethal. Next to him was Ray, the private investigator. Ray looked like a man who had seen the bottom of every bottle and the inside of every closet in Atlanta. He didn't wear a suit. He wore a leather jacket and a look of permanent cynicism. "Sit down, gentlemen," I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. I was still wearing the silk robe, but I felt like I was wearing armor. We sat. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain lashing against the windows 40 stories up. So Marcus began opening a thick file folder. "We have done a deep dive on the targets. You want the bad news or the worst news?" Give it all to me, I said. I don't have the luxury of illusions anymore. Marcus slid a stack of papers toward me. It was a financial autopsy of my son's life. I looked at the numbers and I felt a wave of nausea. Dante is drowning, Mr. Freeman, Marcus said, his voice clinical, devoid of emotion. He has $90,000 in credit card debt spread across 6 different cards. He has a second mortgage on the house you paid for. He has a car loan on a BMW he can't afford, and he is 3 months behind on payments. I looked at the statements. The purchases were pathetic. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, bottle service at clubs where he was too old to be. It was the spending of a man trying desperately to prove he was somebody. He is a hollow man, Ray added, his voice gravelly. I tailed him for 3 days. He doesn't go to work. He got fired from that logistics job 4 months ago. He puts on a suit every morning, drives to a coffee shop, and sits there for 8 hours, playing games on his phone so Tiffany won't know he is unemployed. He is terrified of her. My son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had taught to fish. He was living a lie so deep he probably didn't know which way was up anymore. He was weak. He was a coward. But reading the file, I realized he wasn't the mastermind. He was the pawn. He borrows money from loan sharks. Ray continued tapping a photo of Dante meeting a shady character in a parking lot. Small amounts, just enough to pay the minimums on the cards so the lights stay on. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul is getting impatient. I closed Dante's file. It hurt too much to look at it. It was a portrait of a failure I had raised. What about her, I asked. What about Tiffany? Ray smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has found the trail. Ah, the queen bee. He opened a second file. It was thicker. Tiffany comes from a trailer park in Macon, Ray said. She changed her name 3 times. She reinvented herself as a Southern belle, but the pedigree is fake. She is obsessed with status. She spends every dime Dante borrows on appearances. But here's the kicker. Ray slid a series of photographs across the table. They showed Tiffany standing outside a wrought iron gate, arguing with a man in a green blazer. She looked furious, her face twisted and ugly. The Buckhead Golf and Country Club, Ray said. She has applied for membership 4 times. She has been rejected 4 times. Why, I asked. Because they know, Marcus interjected. Old money smells new money a mile away. They think she is tacky. They think she is loud. And frankly, Mr. Freeman, they know she is broke. But she doesn't know that they know. She thinks it is a misunderstanding. She thinks if she just buys the right dress or drives the right car, they will let her in. It is her obsession. She wants to be one of the ladies who lunch. She wants to erase where she came from. I looked at the picture of Tiffany screaming at the gatekeeper. I saw the desperation. I saw the hunger. And there is something else, Ray said, his voice dropping lower. Something you need to hear. He pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on the table. I got close to her at a salon yesterday. She was talking to her stylist. She didn't think anyone was listening. He pressed play. The audio was crisp. I heard the snip of scissors and the hum of blow dryers. And then I heard Tiffany's voice, unmistakable and shrill. I just need that old man out of the house, she was saying. He ruins everything. I tried to have a dinner party last week, and I could smell him from the guest room. It is like living with a farm animal, and honestly having him there, it just looks bad. You know? Looks bad, how another voice asked. It looks low class, Tiffany hissed. He sits on the porch in his undershirt drinking beer. He talks like he is from the ghetto. I am trying to build a brand here. I am trying to get into the club. I can't have some senile old black man wandering around reminding everyone that Dante isn't, one of us. The recording stopped. The silence in the room was absolute. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just that she wanted the house. It was that she was ashamed of me. She was ashamed of my skin. She was ashamed of my history. She looked at me, and she didn't see a man who had worked for 50 years. She saw a stain on her perfect white life. She saw a reminder that her husband wasn't the blue blood she pretended he was. She wanted to erase me because I didn't fit the aesthetic. I looked up at Marcus and Ray. They were watching me, waiting for the explosion. But I didn't explode. The anger crystallized. It became something sharp and useful. So I said, my voice quiet. She wants to be elite. She wants to be accepted. She wants money and status more than she wants air to breathe. Yes, Marcus said. That is her weakness. She is a narcissist. If you dangle status in front of her, she will bite every time. She won't look for the hook. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was still falling, washing the city. She thinks I am trash, I whispered. She thinks I am a stain. I turned back to the table. We are going to give her what she wants. We are going to give her a ticket to the big leagues. I pointed to the picture of the golf club. Does the Phoenix Trust have a membership there? I asked. Viola owns the land the club sits on, Marcus said with a smirk. We don't just have a membership, we have the board in our pocket. Good, I said. Get me a meeting. Not as Isaiah Freeman, the construction worker, but as the silent investor, the man on the magazine cover. I looked at the file on Dante. And my son, he is weak. He follows the strongest person in the room. Right now, that is Tiffany. We need to make him choose. We need to put him in a position where he has to decide between his wife's greed and his father's life. And I want to see him break. Ray gathered the photos. So what is the play, Zeke? The play is simple, I said. We are going to let them think they won. We are going to let them think they found me. We are going to let them think I am confused and rich and vulnerable. We are going to let Tiffany think she can charm me out of my fortune. I picked up the recorder, holding the evidence of her hate in my hand. She wants to get into the club. I am going to open the door for her. And when she walks through it thinking she has finally arrived, I am going to slam it shut on her fingers. I looked at Marcus. Get the paperwork ready. I want to buy Dante's debt. I want to buy the mortgage on my old house. I want to own the car she drives and the clothes on her back. I want to own the very air they breathe. Consider it done, Marcus said, closing his laptop. I walked over to the wet bar and poured another drink. My hand was steady. The image of the bridge was fading, replaced by the image of Tiffany's face when she realizes who I really am. They wanted a senile old man, I said, raising my glass to the empty room. They are about to get a tycoon. Class is dismissed, gentlemen. Tomorrow we go to work. The bell above the door to Giacomo's bespoke tailoring did not ding like a grocery store entrance. It chimed with a soft, resonant sound that signaled entry into a world most people only ever glimpsed through a window. I stepped onto a Persian rug so thick it felt like walking on moss. The air inside smelled of cedar shavings, lavender steam, and the distinct metallic tang of expensive wool. It was the smell of power. Viola walked in ahead of me, her cane tapping a rhythm on the hardwood floor. An elderly Italian man with a measuring tape draped around his neck like a stole emerged from the back room. He did not look at my calloused hands. He did not look at the way I still favored my left leg, the one that had stiffened up during the freezing nights under the I-85 overpass. He looked at Viola, then he looked at me, and he nodded with a grave professional respect. "Signore Freeman," he said, his voice hushed. "We have been expecting you." I stepped up onto the circular pedestal in the center of the room, surrounded by a triptych of mirrors. For a moment, I wanted to step down. I wanted to run. The reflection staring back at me was a fraud. I was Isaiah Freeman, a man who had spent 50 years wearing denim and work boots covered in dust and drywall. Standing there, I felt exposed like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Viola sat in a leather armchair in the corner, watching me with eyes that missed nothing. She saw my hesitation. She saw the way my shoulders slumped, the way I unconsciously tried to make myself smaller, a habit I had picked up in the shelter to avoid trouble. "Straighten your spine, Zeke," she commanded, her voice cutting through the quiet shop. "You are not carrying bricks anymore. You are carrying an empire. Act like it." I looked at myself in the mirror. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the shop. I thought about Dante. I thought about how he looked at me with disgust when he shoved me out of the car. He saw a weak old man. He saw a burden. I rolled my shoulders back. I lifted my chin. I locked eyes with my reflection. The man in the mirror grew 2 inches taller. The tailor moved around me like a ghost, his chalk marking the fabric with swift, precise strokes. He measured my inseam, my chest, the length of my arms. He didn't ask me what style I wanted. He knew. He brought out bolts of fabric that cost more per yard than I used to make in a month. Vicuna wool from the Andes, silk from Como. "We are not just making a suit, signore," the tailor murmured as he pinned a sleeve. "We are building a silhouette. A man who wears this does not ask for permission. He grants it." I watched as he constructed the armor. A midnight blue 3-piece suit cut sharp to emphasize the width of my shoulders, shoulders built by decades of labor. A crisp white shirt with French cuffs, a silk tie, and a deep blood red. When I finally put it on, the transformation was visceral. The fabric didn't just sit on me, it held me. It forced me to stand differently. I walked back and forth in front of the mirrors practicing. I had to unlearn 72 years of humility. I had to unlearn the shuffle of the working man. I had to learn the stride of the owner. Head up, Viola coached from her chair. Slower, Zeke. Poor men rush because they are afraid of being late. Rich men take their time because the meeting doesn't start until they arrive. Walk like you own the floorboards. I slowed down. I let my heels click against the wood with a deliberate, heavy cadence. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a gavel coming down. It was the sound of judgment approaching. We left the tailor and went to a private jeweler on the top floor of a bank building. This was the part I struggled with the most. I had always believed that a watch was for telling time and nothing else. A $10 digital watch did the same job as a $10,000 one. But Marcus the lawyer had explained the psychology of the grift. Tiffany speaks fluent luxury, he had said. She reads catalogs like they are scripture. If you wear a cheap watch, she will spot it in a second. You need bait, Zeke. You need something that screams old money, something that whispers that you have so much wealth you don't even care about it. The jeweler placed a velvet tray on the glass counter. It was filled with gold and diamonds watches that looked more like jewelry than timepieces. I shook my head. No, I said, my voice finding a new depth in the quiet room. I don't want to look like a rapper. I want to look like the man who signs the rapper's checks. The jeweler smiled a thin, knowing smile. He reached under the counter and brought out a single box. He opened it. Inside sat a Patek Philippe Calatrava. It was understated. It was simple. It was devastatingly elegant. White gold, I said, picking it up. It felt heavy, substantial. It is timeless, the jeweler said, and it tells the world that you value tradition over trends. I fastened it around my wrist. The leather strap was cool against my skin. This wasn't just a watch. It was a signal. It was a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog designed to draw one specific ship onto the rocks. Tiffany would see this watch, and she would lose her mind. She would see her ticket to the country club. She would see her validation. We finished the ensemble with a pair of handmade Italian leather shoes burnished to a shine that you could see your soul in. When I walked out of that building, I wasn't Zeke anymore. Zeke was dead. I was Isaiah Freeman, the patriarch, the tycoon, the mystery. Back at the penthouse, Viola was on the phone. She was speaking in low, rapid tones to the editor of the Atlanta Business Chronicle, a man she had helped out of a lawsuit years ago. Yes, she was saying, it is an exclusive, the silent partner, the man behind the Freeman success. He has been abroad overseeing our international interests, but he is back in Atlanta to launch the Phoenix Trust. Yes, 8 million liquid assets to start. No, he doesn't do interviews usually, but for you, George, he might make an exception. She hung up and turned to me, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. It is done, she said. They are stopping the presses. You are the cover story for the Sunday edition. 2 days later, a courier delivered a bundle of magazines to the penthouse. The ink still smelled fresh. I picked one up, my new manicured hands holding the glossy paper. There I was. The photographer had caught me looking out a window, my profile sharp against the city skyline. I looked imposing. I looked mysterious. I looked like a man who held the keys to the city in his pocket. The headline was bold printed in heavy black letters, "The Silent Partner Speaks." Isaiah Freeman returns to Atlanta with the Phoenix Trust. Underneath was a smaller caption, "The reclusive billionaire eyes new investments in the Buckhead district." I stared at my own face. It was a mask, a perfectly constructed lie designed to destroy the people who had tried to erase me. I traced the line of my jaw. I looked at the Patek Philippe glinting on my wrist in the photo. Somewhere in the city, in the house that used to be mine, Dante was probably waking up. He would go to the coffee shop. He would pick up a paper, and his world would stop. I set the magazine down on the table next to the black card. The bait was in the water, the hook was sharp, and I was ready to reel them in. I sat in the leather chair of my penthouse study, the lights of Atlanta twinkling below me like scattered diamonds. On the desk in front of me, a laptop screen glowed with a high-definition feed. My private investigator, Ray, had been busy. While I was getting fitted for Italian suits, he had been installing cameras in the smoke detectors of the house I had built with my own hands. The house my son had stolen. I watched in silence. It was like looking into a cage at the zoo, observing the behavior of animals when they think no one is watching. The living room, once my pride and joy, was a disaster zone. Takeout boxes were stacked like leaning towers on the coffee table. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the midday sun, creating a gloomy, suffocating atmosphere that smelled even through the screen of stale beer and despair. Tiffany was sprawled on the sofa wearing a silk robe that had seen better days. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles, her makeup smeared from the night before. She was scrolling through her phone, her face twisted into a permanent scowl. She looked like a queen whose kingdom had turned to ash. The front door opened and Dante walked in. He looked defeated. His shoulders were slumped, his cheap suit wrinkled. He carried a cardboard tray with 2 coffees and a rolled-up newspaper tucked under his arm. He looked like a man who had been beaten by life, which was ironic considering he had never fought for anything a day in his life. "You got the wrong latte again, didn't you?" Tiffany snapped without looking up from her phone. "I can tell just by looking at you. You can't even get coffee right." Dante sighed, placing the cups on the cluttered table. "They were out of almond milk, Tiff. I got oat milk. It's basically the same thing." "It is not the same thing," she shrieked, throwing her phone down. "God, you are useless. I ask for one thing, one simple thing, and you fail. Just like you failed at that interview yesterday. Just like you fail at everything." Dante didn't argue. He was used to the abuse. He just sat down heavily in my old armchair, the springs groaning under his weight. He pulled the newspaper out from under his arm. It wasn't the regular paper. It was the Atlanta Business Chronicle. He must have grabbed it by mistake, or maybe the bright colors caught his eye. He tossed it onto the coffee table, knocking over a stack of unopened bills. The magazine slid across the surface, coming to rest right in front of Tiffany. She glared at it, ready to swipe it onto the floor, but then she froze. Her hand stopped mid-air. Her eyes, bloodshot and tired, widened until I thought they might pop out of her skull. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. She just stared. On the cover, staring back at her with eyes of cold steel, was me. "Dante," she whispered. Her voice was trembling so hard it barely registered on the microphone. "Dante, look at this." "What?" Dante grunted, reaching for his coffee. "Look at it!" she screamed, grabbing the magazine and shoving it into his face. "Look at the picture." Dante recoiled, spilling hot coffee on his hand. He cursed, wiping it on his pants, and then he looked. Silence descended on the room. It was a heavy, terrified silence. That's Dad," Dante stammered. His face went pale, the color draining away until he looked like a ghost. "But that's impossible. We left him." "Read the headline." Tiffany hissed, her fingers clawing at the glossy paper. "Read it out loud." Dante squinted his hands, shaking so badly the magazine rattled. "The silent partner returns. Isaiah Freeman launches the Phoenix Trust with $8 million in liquid assets." The words hung in the air. $8 million. Tiffany snatched the magazine back. She flipped the pages frantically, tearing one in her haste. She scanned the article, her lips moving as she read, devouring the information like a starving wolf. "He isn't dead," she breathed, looking up. Her expression was a terrifying mix of horror and rapture. "He isn't freezing in a gutter. He is rich, Dante. He is filthy, stinking rich. He has been rich this whole time." Dante stood up, pacing the room, running his hands through his hair. He looked like he was about to vomit. "This is bad, Tiff. This is really bad. He isn't just alive. He is powerful. If he has that kind of money, he has lawyers. He has investigators. He remembers what we did." He stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes wide with panic. "He is going to put us in jail. Kidnapping, abandonment, attempted murder. We drugged him, Tiff. We dumped him like a dog. If he comes back, if he comes for us—" "Shut up!" Tiffany yelled, standing up to face him. "Stop whining." She wasn't scared anymore. I watched her face change on the screen. The fear evaporated, replaced by a greed so potent it was almost palpable. She looked at my picture again, tracing the line of my bespoke suit with her finger. "He doesn't know," she said slowly, a plan forming behind her eyes. "What do you mean he doesn't know?" Dante shouted. "He was there. He was in the car. He was drugged," Tiffany countered, stepping closer to him. "He was out of his mind. And remember the note. Remember the story we agreed on. He has Alzheimer's. He wandered off. We tried to stop him, but he got confused and aggressive and ran away. That is the story, Dante. Stick to the story. Dante shook his head violently. It won't work. He isn't senile in this picture. Look at him. He looks like a king. He is going to destroy us. You coward. Tiffany spat. You spineless little worm. Do you see that number? $8 million. Do you know what that means? It means our debts disappear. It means the club membership. It means the house in the Hamptons. It means we never have to work again. She grabbed Dante by the lapels of his jacket, shaking him. We threw away a winning lottery ticket because we thought it was trash, but we got a second chance. Do you understand fate is giving us a do-over? But he hates us, Dante cried. He has to hate us. He is an old man, Tiffany screamed back. He is lonely. He is sentimental. He adopted you, didn't he? He took in a stray kid and raised him. That is his weakness. Dante, he wants to be loved. He wants a family. She let go of him and started pacing, her energy manic. Here is what we are going to do. We are going to go find him. We are going to show up at his fancy new tower with flowers and tears in our eyes. We are going to tell him we have been searching for him day and night for 3 months. We are going to tell him we were frantic, that we filed police reports, that we hired private detectives, but we couldn't find him. But the police, Dante started. We never filed a report, Tiffany cut him off. And he doesn't know that. He is old. If we cry hard enough, if we hug him tight enough, he will believe us. He will want to believe us. Because the alternative is believing that his own son tried to kill him, and no father wants to believe that. Dante sank back into the chair, putting his head in his hands. I can't do it, Tiff. I can't look him in the eye and lie. Not after what we did. Tiffany stopped pacing. She walked over to him slowly. The look on her face was pure ice. She raised her hand and slapped him. It was a hard, sharp crack that echoed through the speakers of my laptop. Dante's head snapped to the side. You will do it, she hissed, leaning down until her face was inches from his. You will do it because if you don't, we lose the house. You will do it because if you don't, I will leave you and I will tell the police it was all your idea. I will tell them you forced me to drive the car. I will tell them everything, Dante. And you will rot in prison alone. Dante touched his cheek, looking at her with fear. He knew she would do it. He knew she was capable of anything. So she whispered, her voice turning sickly sweet. Are you going to be a good son? Are you going to go get Daddy and bring him home? Dante nodded slowly, a broken man surrendering to his master. Yes, he whispered. Yes. I will go. Good, Tiffany said, straightening up and smoothing her robe. Now go shave. You look like a bum. We need to look like we have been grieving, not like we have been sleeping till noon. And get flowers, not the cheap ones. Put it on the emergency credit card. We need to look like we care. She picked up the magazine again, staring at my photo with a hunger that made my skin crawl. $8 million, she muttered to herself, a smile spreading across her face that didn't reach her eyes. Daddy is coming home, and he's going to buy me the world. I closed the laptop. My hand was clenched so tight around my glass that I thought it might shatter. I sat in the dark of the penthouse, the silence ringing in my ears. They weren't sorry. They weren't remorseful. They were just hungry. They looked at me and saw a meal ticket. They looked at their crime and saw an opportunity. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the streets where they would soon be driving to come and lie to my face. Come on then, I whispered to the glass. Come and try to eat. But you better be careful, because this time the food bites back. The lobby of the penthouse building was a cathedral of marble and silence. The air was cool and smelled faintly of orchids. I sat in a high-backed velvet chair near the fountain, hidden in the shadows, watching the revolving door. I checked my Patek Philippe. They were late. Of course they were. Tiffany would have made Dante change his tie 3 times, and she would have spent an hour on her hair to look perfectly disheveled, the grieving daughter-in-law who hadn't slept in weeks. Finally the doors spun. Dante walked in first. He looked like a man walking to his execution but trying to pretend it was a birthday party. His suit was ill-fitting, straining at the buttons, a relic from his college days that he hadn't worn since he gained 20 pounds of stress weight. In his hand he clutched a bouquet of carnations wrapped in crinkly plastic. The price tag was still visible, $4.99. Gas station flowers, the kind you buy when you realize you forgot an anniversary on the way home. Tiffany followed him. She was wearing a modest dress, high-necked and long-sleeved, a stark contrast to her usual flashy attire. Her makeup was subtle, designed to make her look pale and wan. She clutched a tissue in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes. She looked around the lobby, her eyes widening as they took in the crystal chandelier, the polished floors, the security guard who looked more like a Secret Service agent. I saw the calculation in her gaze. She was pricing everything. They spotted me. Or rather, Tiffany spotted me and elbowed Dante hard in the ribs. "There," she hissed loud enough to echo in the quiet space. Dante's head snapped up. He saw me sitting there dressed in my bespoke suit, my legs crossed, looking like the king of Atlanta. For a second, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He remembered the bridge. He remembered the cold. He remembered what he had done. But then Tiffany shoved him forward. "Go," she whispered. The performance began. "Dad!" Dante cried out, his voice cracking theatrically. He dropped the flowers. They hit the floor with a pathetic slap, water leaking from the plastic. He ran toward me, his arms outstretched. "Dad, oh God, Dad!" He threw himself at my feet, falling to his knees on the hard marble. He wrapped his arms around my legs, burying his face in my expensive trousers. I felt his body shaking. Was it grief? Was it fear? Or was it just the knowledge that he was hugging $8 million? "We found you," and he sobbed, his voice muffled against my knee. "We looked everywhere. We thought you were gone. We thought we lost you." I looked down at the top of his head. I saw the thinning hair, the sweat beading on his scalp. I felt a wave of revulsion so strong I almost kicked him away. This was the boy I had raised. This was the man who had dumped me in the trash. And now he was kneeling before me, not in repentance, but in greed. Tiffany was right behind him. She fell to her knees beside him, grabbing my hand. Her grip was tight, possessive, her nails digging into my skin. "Oh, Pop," she wailed, squeezing out a few real tears. Thank God you're safe. We have been sick with worry. Sick." She looked up at me, her eyes wide and imploring. "Where did you go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We turned around for 1 second, just 1 second, to get you a water, and you were gone. We drove up and down that street for hours, screaming your name. Lies. Beautiful, rehearsed lies." They hadn't turned around. They had driven off laughing. I looked at them. I looked at the spectacle they were making. The security guard took a step forward, but I waved him off with a small motion of my hand. I needed this. I needed to see how far they would go. I blinked slowly, letting my mouth hang open just a fraction, letting a look of confusion cloud my eyes. I was Isaiah Freeman, the tycoon, but I needed to be Zeke, the confused old man, just for a little while longer. "Dante," I asked, my voice quavering. "Tiffany, is that you?" "Yes, Dad, it's us," Dante cried, looking up, hope flaring in his eyes. "We are here to take you home." I frowned, looking around the lobby as if I didn't know where I was. "Home," I murmured. "But I thought I was home. Viola said this was home." "Viola," Tiffany asked, her voice sharpening. "Your sister. She is here. She found me," I said, looking at my hands. "I was cold. I was walking. I think I was walking to the store to get milk, and then I got lost. The streets all looked the same, and it was so cold. I let a shudder pass through my body. It wasn't fake. The memory of that cold never really left me. And then Viola came," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "She had a big car, a warm car. She said she had been looking for me too. She said I had money, lots of money." I looked at Dante, my eyes wide and innocent. "Did you know I had money?" "Son, Viola said it was from the old land. She said it was millions. $8 million. The effect was instantaneous. Dante stopped crying. He froze. Tiffany's grip on my hand tightened until it hurt. She looked at Dante, and for a split second the mask slipped. I saw the hunger. I saw the avarice. I saw the calculation. 8 million. She breathed, the number tasting sweet on her tongue. "Yes," I said, nodding vaguely. "It is in a trust, the Phoenix Trust. I don't really understand it. It is all numbers and papers. Viola set me up here, in the penthouse." I pointed upward. "It is nice," I said. "Big, but empty." Tiffany scrambled to her feet, pulling Dante up with her. The grieving daughter-in-law was gone. In her place was the shark. "Oh, Dad," she said, her voice smooth and slick as oil. "You shouldn't be alone in a big place like that, not with your condition. You need family. You need us." "My condition?" I asked, tilting my head. "Your memory, Pop," she said, patting my hand condescendingly. "You get confused, like when you wandered off. We can't let that happen again. We need to take care of you." She looked at Dante, her eyes flashing a command. "Play along, you idiot." "Yes, Dad," Dante stammered, wiping his face. "We want to take care of you. We love you. Come home with us. Your room is waiting." I looked at them. They were practically vibrating with anticipation. They thought they had won the lottery. They thought I was a senile old fool who had stumbled into a fortune and was handing it to them on a silver platter. "I don't know," I said, hesitating. "Viola said I should stay here. She said you might not want me." "Not want you?" Tiffany shrieked a little too loudly. "Of course we want you. We are your family. Viola doesn't know us. She hasn't been around in years. We are the ones who have been there for you." The audacity was breathtaking. They had been there for me, all right. They had been there to drug me and dump me. "Well," I said slowly, maybe I could show you the apartment Viola ordered dinner. There's a lot of food, lobster, steak, too much for one old man." Tiffany's eyes lit up. "Lobster?" she asked. "Oh, Dad, that sounds wonderful. We haven't eaten all day. We were too worried about you." "Then come up," I said, standing slowly, leaning on my cane. "Come up and see." I led them to the elevator. The ride up was silent, but the air was thick with their greed. I could hear them breathing. I could feel their excitement. They were already spending the money. They were already planning the renovations. They were already burying me. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, the reaction was exactly what I expected. Tiffany gasped. She stepped out onto the marble floor, her heels clicking, her eyes darting everywhere. She took in the floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing the Atlanta skyline at sunset, the city burning with gold and violet light. She took in the modern Italian furniture, the crystal chandelier, the original art on the walls. She spun around her face a mask of pure, unadulterated lust. "This is yours," she whispered. "For now," I said, shuffling into the room. "Viola put it in my name. She said I deserve the best." Tiffany walked over to the window, pressing her hand against the glass. She looked down at the city, at the people below, like a queen surveying her subjects. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It's perfect." She turned to Dante, her eyes shining. "Dante, look," she said. "Look at this view. Imagine waking up to this every day." Dante looked. He looked at the luxury. He looked at the wealth. And then he looked at me. For a moment I saw shame in his eyes. He knew he didn't deserve this. He knew he had thrown me away. But then he looked back at Tiffany, and the shame vanished, replaced by the same hunger that consumed his wife. "Yeah," he said softly. "Imagine." I watched them. They were caught. They were in the trap. They saw the cheese, but they didn't see the spring. "Dinner is served," I said, gesturing to the table where the private chef had laid out a feast fit for a king. "Sit, eat, let's be a family again." They sat, they ate, they drank my wine, and all the while I smiled, a small, confused, senile smile. The smile of a man who doesn't know he is about to be eaten. But I wasn't the prey. I was the predator. And dinner was just the appetizer. The main course was coming, and it was going to be served cold. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that sounded like the bell of a cash register. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows with my back to the room, watching the lights of Atlanta sprawling out below me like a spilled jewelry box. I was wearing my new midnight blue suit, the fabric cool and smooth against my skin. It felt like armor. It felt like a second skin that I had been born to wear. I took a sip of sparkling water and turned around to face my guests. Dante and Tiffany stepped out of the elevator and into the penthouse. Their reaction was everything I had hoped for. It was a mixture of awe and naked hunger. They stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes darting around the room, taking in the Italian marble floors, the modern art that cost more than their lives, and the crystal chandelier that dripped light like frozen rain. Tiffany's hand went to her throat. Her fingers twitched. I could see the calculations running behind her eyes. She wasn't seeing a home. She was seeing a price tag. She was seeing the square footage. She was seeing the life she believed she deserved. Dad Dante breathed, his voice hushed and reverent. This place is incredible. I gave them a small, tired smile, leaning heavily on my cane. It was a prop, but it was a necessary one. It made me look frail. It made me look like I needed help. It is nice, I said, my voice raspy and worn. Viola insisted. She said an old man needs his comforts after everything I have been through. I gestured toward the dining table where my private chef Pierre had laid out a feast fit for royalty. The table was set with fine china and silverware that gleamed under the soft lighting. There were crystal glasses for the wine and heavy linen napkins folded into intricate shapes. Sit, I said. Please, you must be hungry. They moved toward the table, walking carefully as if they were afraid the floor might crack under their feet. They sat down. Tiffany ran her hand along the edge of the table, her eyes greedy. I sat at the head of the table watching them. I felt like a scientist observing specimens in a lab. Pierre served the first course, a delicate salad with truffle oil and shaved parmesan. Dante looked at it with confusion, poking at the greens with his fork. Tiffany, however, dove in. She ate with a desperation that betrayed her. She wasn't just hungry for food. She was hungry for the status that the food represented. She chewed with her mouth slightly open, her eyes never leaving the room, scanning the furniture, the art, the view. So Tiffany said between bites, "Viola has been taking care of you all this time." "Yes," I said, nodding slowly. "She found me. She helped me get back on my feet. She felt guilty, I suppose. For all the years she had the money and I didn't." I paused, letting the silence stretch out. I took a sip of water, and then she gave me the trust. Tiffany froze. Her fork clattered onto her plate. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "The trust," she asked. "The Phoenix Trust." I continued, my voice low. $8 million. It is a lot of money. Too much for an old man like me, really. Tiffany's eyes seemed to dilate. She leaned forward, her salad forgotten. "Too much," she echoed. "Yes." I sighed, rubbing my temples as if I had a migraine. "It is overwhelming. All the paperwork, the investments, the taxes, the decisions. Viola tries to help, but she is busy with her own business empire. She travels constantly, and honestly, I get confused. The numbers, they swim in my head. I forget things. I lose track of dates." I looked at Dante, my expression helpless and pathetic. "I just want to rest, son. I want to enjoy my last years without worrying about stocks and bonds. I want to sit in a chair and watch the sunset. But someone has to manage it. Someone has to sign the checks. Someone has to be the steward of the legacy." Under the table, I saw Tiffany's shoulder dip. Her leg shot out, and I heard the dull thud of her heel connecting with Dante's shin. Dante jumped in his seat, wincing in pain. He looked at her, bewildered. She glared back at him, her eyes flashing a silent, violent command. "Say something, you idiot!" Dante cleared his throat, his face flushing red. He looked at me, his eyes shifting nervously. "Well, Dad," he stammered, maybe we could help." I looked at him, feigning surprise. I raised my eyebrows. "You?" I asked. "But Dante, you have your job. You have your life. You are a busy man. I wouldn't want to be a burden. I wouldn't want to add to your stress." "Oh, it wouldn't be a burden," Tiffany interjected, her voice shrill and eager. "Not at all, Dad. We are family. Family helps family. That is what we do. Dante is great with numbers. He handles all our finances. He is a wizard with budgets. He could easily take care of the trust for you." I fought the urge to laugh. I knew for a fact that Dante's idea of handling finances was ignoring collection calls and opening new credit cards to pay off the interest on the old ones. He was a financial disaster. But I nodded slowly, as if considering the idea. That would be helpful, I admitted. It would take a weight off my shoulders. I am just so tired. I don't have the energy for it anymore. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hand tremble slightly as I reached for my water glass, but I hesitated, looking down at my plate. But what Tiffany asked, leaning closer, her predator instincts fully engaged. "But I need to be sure," I said, looking up at them, my eyes watery. "This money, it isn't just money. It is my legacy. It is what I leave behind for the future generations. It is the Freeman name. I need to know that whoever manages it respects it, and respects me. I let the words sink in. I saw Dante shift uncomfortably in his chair. He knew he hadn't respected me. He knew he had thrown me away like garbage 3 months ago, but greed is a powerful drug, and he was already addicted. The shame flickered in his eyes and then died, smothered by the promise of millions. "Of course we respect you, Dad," he said, his voice thick with false sincerity. "We love you. We would do anything for you. Anything." "Anything?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Anything," Tiffany echoed, her eyes locked on mine, her face a mask of devotion. I smiled. It was a small, sad smile, the smile of a father who wants to believe his children even when he knows they are lying. "Good," I said. "Then I have a proposal." Pierre cleared the salad plates and brought out the main course, lobster thermidor. The scent of rich cream and brandy filled the air. It was decadent. It was excessive. It was exactly what Tiffany wanted her life to be. I picked up my wine glass, swirling the dark red liquid. "I am willing to give you power of attorney over the Phoenix Trust," I said. "I am willing to let you manage the money. I am willing to let you make the decisions." Tiffany gasped softly. I could see her mentally redecorating the penthouse already. But first I continued, my voice hardening just a fraction. "You have to prove yourselves." "Prove ourselves?" Tiffany asked, her brow furrowing slightly. "How?" "By showing me that you are truly filial," I said. "By showing me that you care about me, not just the money. I want you to move in here for 1 week." Tiffany's eyes lit up, moving into the penthouse. Living in luxury, waking up to this view. It was a dream come true. It wasn't a test, it was a vacation. "That sounds wonderful," she exclaimed. "We would love to." "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. "Not as guests, not as family." I leaned forward. "I don't want you to sit around and drink my wine. I want you to take care of me. I want you to cook for me. I want you to clean for me. I want you to help me with my daily tasks. I want to see that you are willing to serve your father, not just spend his money. I want to see humility." I watched their faces. Dante looked horrified. The idea of manual labor was anathema to him. He had spent his life trying to avoid getting his hands dirty. Tiffany looked calculating. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was weighing the cost a week of servitude against the reward, $8 million. It was simple math. "Just 1 week," she asked. 1 week, I confirmed. "If you can do that, if you can show me that you are truly dedicated, then the trust is yours to manage. I will sign the papers next Sunday." I took a sip of wine, watching them over the rim of the glass. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Tiffany looked at Dante. She nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. She was willing to scrub floors with a toothbrush if it meant she could buy a membership to the country club. "We will do it," she said, turning back to me with a bright fake smile. "We will do whatever it takes, Dad. We won't let you down. We want to show you how much we love you." "I hope not," I said softly. "Because this is your only chance." I signaled to Pierre to pour more wine. As the lobster was placed in front of them, I saw the greed in their eyes, the hunger. They thought they had won. They thought they were smart. They thought they were playing a senile old man. They didn't know that the week ahead would be the longest week of their lives. They didn't know that I had prepared a curriculum of humiliation designed specifically for them. They didn't know that I was going to break them piece by piece until their true nature was exposed for the world to see. "Eat," I said, gesturing to the food. "You will need your strength." They dug in, oblivious to the sword hanging over their heads. I watched them, my appetite gone, replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. School was about to begin. The digital clock on the microwave glowed a neon green 4:00. It was the hour of the wolf, the time when the city of Atlanta held its breath before the morning rush. 40 stories up, the silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tapping of my cane against the Italian marble floor. I was already dressed. I wore a charcoal vest over a crisp white shirt, my sleeves rolled up to the elbows, revealing the scars that mapped my history of labor. I wasn't working today, though. Today, I was the foreman. I stood in the center of the sprawling living room, looking down at a galvanized metal bucket filled with soapy water and a stiff bristled brush. Next to it lay a rag gray and frayed, the kind I used to use to wipe mortar off bricks. It was a humble set of tools in a room worth millions, a jarring blemish on the perfection of the penthouse. The elevator chimed softly. The doors slid open, and my son Dante stepped out. He looked like a man walking into a firing squad. He was wearing a pair of designer sweatpants that cost $300 and a t-shirt that was probably spun from Egyptian cotton. His eyes were puffy, red-rimmed from lack of sleep and the stress of living a lie. He yawned a wide, disrespectful gape and scratched his stomach. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. He looked around, expecting perhaps a breakfast buffet or a stack of documents to sign. Instead, he saw the bucket. "Good morning, Dante," I said, my voice clear and sharp, cutting through his fatigue. "You are 3 minutes late." He blinked, looking at his watch. "It is 4:03 in the morning, Dad." "What is the difference?" "In my world, 3 minutes is the difference between concrete setting right and a foundation cracking," I said. "If you want to manage this money, if you want to be the head of the Phoenix Trust, you need to learn precision, and you need to learn humility." I pointed my cane at the bucket. "Get on your knees, son." Dante stared at the bucket, then at me, a nervous laugh bubbling up in his throat. "What?" "You are joking, right? The cleaning lady comes at 10. Tiffany said there is a maid service." "There is," I said calmly. "But they clean for money. You are going to clean for character. You see this floor? It is Calicut marble. It stains if you look at it wrong. I spilled some tea yesterday. I want it gone, and I want the rest of the floor spotless." Dante looked at the expanse of white stone. It stretched from the entryway to the kitchen, a sea of white that seemed to go on forever. "You want me to mop it?" he asked, looking around for a handle. "No," I said. "I want you to scrub it. Hand and knees, Dante. Like I did when I laid the floors in your first house. Like I did when I cleaned up your messes for 30 years. I saw the rebellion flare in his eyes. I saw the pride of a man who had never really worked a day in his life trying to stand up. He opened his mouth to argue, to tell me I was crazy to walk out that door. But then he looked at the view. He looked at the crystal chandelier. He looked at the Patek Philippe watch on my wrist. He did the math. $8 million divided by a few hours of humiliation was still a very good hourly rate. The rebellion died. His shoulders slumped. "Okay, Dad," he muttered. "Whatever you want." He knelt. It was a clumsy movement. His knees hit the hard stone with a thud that made me wince internally, remembering the ache of my own joints under the bridge. He dipped the brush into the water and started to scrub. Scrub, swish. Scrub, swish. It was a pathetic sound. He was barely touching the stone. Harder I barked, channeling every foreman who had ever screamed at me in the blazing Georgia sun. "Put your back into it. You are tickling the floor, Dante. You need to clean it." He grunted, pressing down harder. Suds sloshed over the rim of the bucket, soaking the knees of his expensive pants. I walked over to my armchair and sat down. I picked up a cup of coffee, the steam rising in the cool air. I watched him. I remembered a Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. My arthritis had been bad that day, my fingers stiff and uncooperative. I had tried to pass the gravy boat and it had slipped. Brown liquid had splattered onto Dante's tablecloth. Not even an expensive one, just a Target store cloth. He had exploded. "Look what you did, old man," he had shouted, his face twisted in anger. "Can't you hold a simple dish? You are useless. You are making a mess of everything." I had apologized. I had tried to clean it up with my napkin, my hands shaking while Tiffany rolled her eyes and sighed loudly, making sure I knew what a burden I was. Now the tables had turned. "You missed a spot," I said, pointing with my cane to a patch of floor he had just gone over. "Right there. It is still streaky." Dante sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Dad, it is clean. I just scrubbed it." "It is not clean until I say it is clean," I snapped. "Do it again. And use the rag this time. The brush is just moving the dirt around." "You are making a mess, Dante. Can't you do a simple thing?" He looked at me, hatred burning in his eyes. I met his gaze over the rim of my coffee cup, my expression impassive. "Is this too hard for you?" I asked softly. "Is the work too much? We can stop. I can call the lawyer. We can forget the trust. You can go back to your, what was it, logistics?" I knew he didn't have a job to go back to. I knew he had nothing. "No," he gritted out. "I can do it." He dipped the rag and bent over again. He scrubbed. He crawled. Inch by inch he made his way across the room. I watched the sweat soak through his shirt. I watched his movements grow slower, clumsier. The sun began to rise, painting the room in shades of pink and gold. The light hit the floor, revealing every imperfection. "There," I said. "And there. And over by the baseboard. You are lazy, Dante. You are cutting corners. That is why you fail. That is why you are in debt. You think the world owes you a living, but you won't even sweat for it." "Stop it!" he yelled, throwing the rag down. "Just stop riding me, I am doing it." I set my cup down with a sharp clatter. "Do not raise your voice at me, boy," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You are in my house. You are begging for my money. You will show respect, or you will leave." Dante froze. He breathed heavily, his chest heaving. He looked at the door. It was right there. He could walk out. He could end this. But he didn't. He picked up the rag. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered, his voice broken. "I am sorry." He went back to work. For 3 hours I commanded him. I made him clean the grout with a toothbrush. I made him polish the baseboards until they mirrored his defeated face. I made him feel every year of my labor, every ache I had endured to put food on his table. By 7 o'clock he was finished. He lay on his back in the middle of the living room, staring up at the ceiling. His hands were red and raw. His knees were surely bruised. He looked like a man who had gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight. I stood up and walked over to him. I looked down at the floor. It was gleaming. "Adequate," I said. Dante closed his eyes. "Get up," I said. "Go wash your hands. You can't sign checks with filthy hands." He struggled to his feet, groaning like an old man. He looked at me, waiting for praise, waiting for a reward. "Same time tomorrow," I said, turning my back on him. "And tomorrow we do the windows." He stumbled out of the penthouse a broken man. I watched him go. I didn't feel pity. I felt a cold satisfaction. He had wanted to treat me like a servant in my own home. Now he knew what it felt like to be on his knees. Down in the lobby he called Tiffany. I knew he would. I had Ray monitoring the calls. I listened to the recording later. Dante was crying. "I can't do it, Tiff," he sobbed into the phone. "He is crazy. He made me scrub the floor for 4 hours. He humiliated me. My knees are killing me. I want to quit." There was a silence on the line. Then Tiffany's voice, sharp as a whip. "You will not quit, Dante Freeman. Do you hear me? You will go back there tomorrow and you will scrub those floors with your tongue if he asks you to." "But Tiff—" "Shut up," she screamed. "Do you know how much debt we are in? Do you know they called about the car again today? We are drowning, Dante. That old man is our life raft. I don't care if he makes you wear a maid's uniform. You will do it. You will smile, and you will get that money." Dante sniffled. "Okay, Tiff. Okay. And Dante," she added, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "if you mess this up, if you let $8 million slip through your fingers because your knees hurt, don't bother coming home." The line went dead. I took off the headphones. I looked at the spotless floor. My son was a slave, not to me, but to his wife's ambition. He was trapped. And tomorrow I was going to tighten the screws. Because tomorrow wasn't just about labor. Tomorrow was about culture. And Tiffany was next on the list. The afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it could not touch the heavy, pungent aroma that had already claimed the room. It was a smell that carried weight. It was the scent of history, of survival, of Sunday afternoons in a house with no air conditioning but plenty of love. To me, it smelled like home. To Tiffany, I knew it would smell like a nightmare. I stood by the massive granite island, an apron tied over my dress shirt, my sleeves rolled up past my elbows. Laid out before me on sheets of brown butcher paper was the raw reality of my heritage. 10 pounds of hog maws, 5 pounds of chitterlings gray and slippery sitting in their own brine, and 4 large pig trotters, the knuckles knobby and pale hair still visible on the skin. The elevator chimed. I didn't turn around. I picked up a knife and started to scrape the fat off a maw, the sound wet and rhythmic. Tiffany walked in. She was dressed for a magazine shoot, not for a kitchen. She wore a silk cream blouse that probably cost more than my first car, and beige linen trousers that were terrified of a stain. Her hair was blown out to perfection, bouncing with every step. She was smiling a bright, practiced smile, ready to charm the senile old man out of his fortune. "Hey, Dad," she chirped, her voice high and airy. "Dante said you wanted to do some cooking today." I love cooking. I actually took a class in Tuscany last year where we made pasta from... She stopped mid-sentence. The smell hit her. It wasn't a subtle scent. It was the earthy barnyard funk of raw intestines and pig stomach. It was the smell of the slaughterhouse floor. Tiffany gagged. It was a visceral, involuntary sound. Her hand flew to her mouth and her eyes watered instantly. She took a step back, her heels clicking on the tile. "Oh my God," she choked out, her voice muffled behind her hand. What is that smell? Is the garbage disposal backed up? Did something die in the vents?" I turned slowly, wiping my hands on a rag. I didn't smile. I looked at her with the gravity of a patriarch. "No, Tiffany," I said, my voice deep and steady. "That is dinner." She lowered her hand slightly, her nose wrinkling in disgust as she looked at the pile of meat on the counter. She stared at the chitterlings like they were venomous snakes. "Dinner," she whispered. "Dad, that is. That is awful. That is garbage meat." "It is soul food," I corrected her, my tone hardening. "It is the food my grandmother raised me on. It is the food that kept my family alive when we weren't allowed to eat the prime cuts. When we had to make a feast out of the scraps the white man threw away." I picked up a long gray strand of chitterling, letting it dangle from my fingers. It glistened in the sunlight. "You said you wanted to be part of this family, Tiffany. You said you wanted to honor the Freeman legacy. Well, this is the legacy. It isn't just bank accounts and real estate. It is this. It is making something out of nothing. It is survival. And if you want to sit at the head of my table, you need to know how to prepare the meal." Tiffany turned a shade of green that clashed with her blouse. She looked at the door, then back at me. I could see the panic rising in her chest. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream that this was beneath her, that she was too good to touch pig guts. But then she looked at the Patek Philippe on my wrist. She remembered the $8 million. I don't know how she stammered. I am trying to be vegan this month, Dad, for the environment." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Vegan," I repeated. "That is a luxury, Tiffany. My ancestors didn't have the luxury of choice. They ate what they had. And tonight we honor them. You aren't vegan today. Today you are a free man." I handed her a knife. "Come here. I will teach you." She approached the counter like she was walking to the gallows. She took the knife, her fingers trembling. "First," I said, "you have to clean them. You have to turn them inside out and scrape them. You have to get every bit of grit, every bit of waste out. If you don't, it ruins the pot. It takes patience. It takes humility." I watched as she reached out and touched the cold, slimy meat. She flinched, her shoulders jerking up toward her ears. She looked at me, pleading with her eyes. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Can't we just hire a chef or order in? I will pay for it." I leaned in close, my face inches from hers. I let the silence stretch out until she squirmed. "You think you are too good for this?" I asked softly. "You think this is beneath you? You look at this food and you see trash. Is that how you see us, Tiffany? Is that how you see my history?" "No," she cried too quickly, too loudly. "No, of course not. I respect the culture. I do." "Then clean the meat," I commanded. For the next 3 hours, I put her through hell. I made her stand there in her expensive heels and scrub intestines until her hands were red and raw. I made her handle the trotters, pointing out the hairs she missed, making her pluck them out one by one. The smell grew stronger as the water warmed, filling the penthouse, clinging to the curtains, seeping into her silk blouse. Tiffany was weeping silently. Tears of frustration, tears of humiliation ran down her face, mixing with the sweat on her upper lip. Her hair began to frizz in the humidity of the boiling pots. Her makeup started to slide. Every time she gagged, and she gagged often, I was there. "Don't stop," I would say. "My mother did this after working 12 hours in a white woman's kitchen. She didn't complain." "Are you weaker than her?" "I am not weak," Tiffany hissed, scrubbing the meat with a violence that was almost impressive. She hated me. I could feel it radiating off her like heat from the stove. She hated the food, she hated the smell, but most of all, she hated that a black man was making her bow down to his history. She felt degraded. She felt dirty. Good. Now she knew how she had made me feel for years. When the sun began to set, the pots were finally bubbling on the stove. The air was thick with the heavy, distinct aroma of boiling chitlins, vinegar, and hot peppers. To me, it smelled like Sunday after church. To Tiffany, it smelled like torture. She stood by the sink, washing her hands for the 10th time, scrubbing them with lemon dish soap, trying to get the scent out of her pores. She looked broken. Her shoulders were slumped, her beautiful clothes were splashed with gray water. "Set the table," I said. "We eat in 20 minutes." She set the table in silence. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Dante, who had been hiding in the guest room, terrified to come out and face the smell. When the food was ready, I served it myself. I ladled a generous portion of the gray wrinkled meat onto her fine china plate. I added a pig trotter, the skin gelatinous and trembling. I put a piece of cornbread on the side. "Sit," I said. Dante sat down, looking at his plate with apprehension, but he picked up his fork. He was used to eating whatever was put in front of him. But Tiffany stared at the plate as if it were a bowl of worms. "Eat," I said. I can't," she whispered. "My stomach." "Eat it!" I roared, slamming my hand on the table. The silver rattled. "You want my money, Tiffany. You want my life. Then you digest my struggle. You swallow it. You don't get to pick and choose which parts of this family you accept. You take it all or you take nothing." She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and loathing. She picked up her fork. Her hand shook so bad the meat quivered. She lifted it to her mouth. She closed her eyes. She put it in. I watched her chew. I watched the muscles in her throat work as she forced herself to swallow. She turned green. She clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes bulging. "Connect with it, Tiffany," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "That is the taste of resilience." She took another bite. And another. Tears were streaming down her face now, openly, freely. She was eating her pride. She was eating her prejudice. But everyone has a breaking point. On the fourth bite, she broke. She dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. She pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the marble. "I can't," she screamed. "I can't do it." She clapped her hand over her mouth, gagging violently. She scrambled away from the table, knocking over her wine glass. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth like a blood stain. She ran out of the dining room, her heels slipping on the polished floor. She ran down the hallway toward the guest bathroom. I heard the door slam. I heard the lock click. And then I heard the retching. I sat there calm and composed. I took a piece of cornbread and buttered it slowly. Dante looked at me, terrified to move. "She has a weak stomach," I said, taking a bite. "Pity. The matriarch of the Freeman family needs a strong constitution." I finished my meal listening to the sounds of her sickness. But it wasn't just sickness. Between the heaving, I heard something else. I heard cursing. Through the thin walls, I heard her voice muffled and wet with bile. "Filthy old bastard, a disgusting animal. I will kill him. I swear to God I will put him in the ground." I smiled. I took a sip of my sweet tea. Let her hate me. Let her rage. The more she hated, the more careless she would become. She had just failed the test of culture. She had just proven that she didn't want my family, she just wanted my funds. And tomorrow she would try to take them. I knew it. I could feel it. She was done playing the good daughter. The mask was gone, washed away by pig fat and vinegar. Now the wolf would come out. I wiped my mouth with my napkin. "Clear the table, Dante," I said, standing up. "And check on your wife. She sounds upset." I walked to my bedroom, humming an old gospel tune, leaving my son to clean up the mess and my daughter-in-law to drown in her own hatred. The game was escalating, and I was winning. The rain battered the glass walls of my penthouse study 40 stories above the city, but the storm inside my headphones was far more violent. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, a tumbler of untouched scotch on the desk beside me, my eyes closed as I listened to the disintegration of my son's marriage. It was happening in real-time broadcast via the tiny transmitter Ray had planted under the dashboard of Tiffany's leased Mercedes. They were parked down the street from the building. I could hear the rhythmic thumping of the windshield wipers and the hum of the idling engine, but those sounds were drowned out by the jagged breathing of two people who had reached the end of their tether. Tiffany was scrubbing her hands. I could hear the friction of skin against skin, a frantic, obsessive sound. She had likely used half a bottle of hand sanitizer since leaving my apartment, but she could still smell the hog maws. She could still smell the poverty she despised. "I can't get it off," she hissed, her voice tight and high with hysteria. "I can still smell it, Dante. It is in my pores. It is in my hair. That old man did this on purpose. He is laughing at us." Dante sighed, a heavy, defeated sound that rattled in his chest. "Calm down, Tiff," he said, his voice weary. "It is just food. It washes off. You are overreacting." The sound of a slap was sharp and shocking even through the digital connection. Don't you tell me to calm down, she shrieked. You didn't have to touch it. You didn't have to stand there while he lectured you about heritage and struggle. You just sat there stuffing your face with cornbread while I was humiliated. You are a coward, Dante. I am doing what I have to do. Dante shot back, his voice rising for the first time. I scrubbed his floors for 4 hours this morning, Tiffany. My knees are raw. My back is killing me. I am playing the game just like you said. You are playing the fool, she spat. He knows, Dante. I am telling you he knows. The way he looked at me, the way he made me eat that filth. He is testing us and we are failing. He is never going to sign those papers. He is just going to string us along until we break. I listened intently. She was smarter than Dante. She had the instincts of a cornered animal. She sensed the trap even if she couldn't see the bars yet. We need that money, Tiff. Dante pleaded, his anger dissolving into desperation. The bank called me again today. They are going to foreclose on the house. They are going to repossess the car. We have maybe 2 weeks before the lights go out. We have to endure this. We have to make him happy. Make him happy. She laughed, a cold, bitter sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. You think scrubbing floors makes him happy? You think eating pig trotters makes him happy? He is enjoying this. He is a sadist. There was a pause filled only by the sound of the rain. Then Tiffany spoke again, her voice lower, deadlier. I looked at him today, Dante. Really looked at him. And you know what I saw? I saw you. What is that supposed to mean? Dante asked. It means you are weak, she said. You're soft. You let people walk all over you. You let your boss fire you. You let the bank push you around. And now you are letting your father treat you like a slave. I am doing it for us, Dante said, his voice trembling. You are doing it because you don't know how to be a man, she cut him off. You are doing it because you need a daddy to save you. You are 35 years old, Dante, and you are still a little boy waiting for an allowance. That is not fair, he whispered. Fair, Tiffany exploded. You want to talk about fair? I married you because I thought you had potential. I thought you were going somewhere. I thought you were different, but you aren't. I heard the rustle of fabric as she turned in her seat facing him. I could visualize the sneer on her face, the cruelty in her eyes. You are just like him, she said, her words dripping with venom. You are just a useless black man like your father. You think the world owes you something because you exist. You think you can just smile and charm your way through life without doing the hard work. Well, guess what, Dante? The world doesn't care, and neither do I. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a heart stopping. It was the silence of a reality shattering. I gripped the armrests of my chair, my knuckles turning white. I had known she was prejudiced. I had known she looked down on us. But hearing her reduce my son to a racial stereotype, to a useless object, was a physical blow. She didn't just hate me. She hated him. She hated the very blood that ran in his veins, the blood he shared with her. Dante didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was unrecognizable. It was small, broken. Is that what you think of me? He asked. Is that what you see when you look at me? I see a bad investment, Tiffany replied, cold as ice. I see a man who can't provide. I see a man who drags me down into the mud with him. Dante let out a shaky breath. Do you love me, Tiff? He asked. The question hung in the air, naked and pathetic. I heard her sigh, the sound of someone bored with a tedious conversation. Love doesn't pay the mortgage, Dante, she said. Love doesn't get me into the Buckhead Club. Love is for people who can afford it. Right now I can't afford you. I closed my eyes. My son was being flayed alive, and he was too weak to stop it. He was sitting there taking it, letting her strip away his dignity layer by layer. I wanted him to scream. I wanted him to throw her out of the car. I wanted him to show just 1 ounce of the Freeman fire. But he didn't. I can fix this, he stammered. I will work harder. I will make Dad sign. I promise, Tiff. Just give me time. Time is a luxury we don't have, she snapped. And frankly, Dante, I don't trust you to fix a sandwich, let alone a multi-million-dollar trust fund. You are too emotional. You are too bonded to him. You look at him and you see your daddy. I look at him and I see an obstacle. What are you saying? Dante asked, fear creeping into his voice. I am saying that I am done waiting for you to grow a spine, she said. I am saying that if we want that money, we have to take it. We can't wait for him to give it to us. He never will. He is playing us, Dante. He is going to dangle that carrot until we starve. But what can we do, Dante asked. He holds all the cards. Not all of them, she said, her voice taking on a conspiratorial edge. He is old, Dante. He is 72. He wanders. He forgets things. He has outbursts. He doesn't have outbursts. Dante argued, weak and confused. He is sharp. You saw him today. He was running circles around us. That is just it, Tiffany said. 1 minute he is sharp, the next he is making us scrub floors and eat garbage. That is erratic behavior, Dante. That is a sign of decline. That is a sign of mental instability. I sat up in my chair. Here it was. The turn. We need to protect him, she said, the lie smooth on her tongue. And we need to protect the assets. If he goes crazy and gives all that money to some charity or some other long-lost relative, we get nothing. We need to step in. Step in how Dante asked. Legal guardianship, she whispered. Conservatorship. We get a doctor to say he is incompetent. We get a judge to sign off on it. We take control of his affairs, for his own good, of course. You want to have him committed? Dante whispered, horror in his voice. I want to save our future, Tiffany corrected him. And I want to do it before he realizes how much we actually owe. Dante was silent again. I could hear the internal struggle, the war between the last shreds of his morality and his overwhelming fear of poverty. I can't do that to him, Tiff, he said finally. He is my dad. He isn't crazy. Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh. You are useless, she said. Utterly useless. Fine. You don't have to do anything, you just have to stay out of my way. What are you going to do? Dante asked. I am going to handle it, she said. I am going to do what needs to be done. Since the man of the house is too weak to pull the trigger, the woman will have to do it. I heard the sound of her seatbelt unclicking. Get out, she said. What? Dante asked. Get out of the car, she said. I have errands to run. I have people to see. You go back to the house. Go cry in your beer. Go wait for Daddy to save you. I am going to go ensure our survival. But it is raining, Dante protested. Walk, she said. It will build character. Isn't that what your father said? The door opened. I heard the rain rushing in louder now. I heard Dante stumble out, his shoes splashing in a puddle. The door slammed shut. The engine revved. Tiffany didn't wait for him to get clear. She peeled away tires, screeching on the wet asphalt, leaving her husband, my son, standing in the rain, alone and broken. I took off the headphones and set them gently on the desk. My hands were trembling, but not from age, from rage, from a cold, hard certainty. Dante was lost. He was a shell, a hollow man who would let a woman call him a racial slur and then beg for her affection. He was beyond saving. But Tiffany was dangerous. She wasn't just greedy anymore. She was cornered. And a cornered rat bites. She was going for the throat. She was going for the conservatorship. She was going to try and lock me away. I looked at the phone. I needed to call Marcus. I needed to call Ray. The game had changed. It wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about survival. She wanted to play the law. She wanted to use the system to bury me. I picked up my glass of scotch and walked to the window. I looked down at the wet streets, imagining Dante walking home in his ruined shoes, imagining Tiffany driving toward her lawyer's office, her mind full of schemes. Go ahead, Tiffany, I whispered to the glass. Make your move. File your papers. Call your doctors. I took a sip, the burn of the alcohol matching the fire in my gut, because while you are playing checkers, I have already bought the board. The rain had stopped, leaving the city of Atlanta glistening like a dark jewel under the streetlights, but inside my penthouse the air was still cold. I sat in the dark, the only illumination coming from the small green light of the receiver on my desk. The headphones were heavy on my ears, pressing the reality of my situation into my skull. I had just heard my son break his spirit, snapping like a dry twig. Now I was waiting to hear what the predator would do next. I didn't have to wait long. The GPS tracker on Ray's laptop showed the Mercedes moving erratically, speeding through yellow lights, weaving through traffic. Tiffany was driving with the reckless abandon of someone who felt the walls closing in. She wasn't going home. She was heading downtown toward the part of the city where the glass skyscrapers gave way to older, grittier brick buildings, the kind of place where deals were made in shadows and handshakes left grease on your palm. The car stopped. I heard the engine cut, followed by the heavy thud of the door opening and closing. Then silence. A few minutes later, the passenger door opened. A man got in. I could hear the rustle of a cheap suit and the wheeze of a heavy smoker. Jerry Tiffany said, her voice tight and breathless. "You are late, Traffic Tiff," the man replied. His voice was like gravel in a blender, rough and unpleasant. "And don't snap at me. You are the one calling me at 9 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday. This better be good. And by good I mean billable. It is worth millions," Jerry Tiffany hissed. 8 million to be exact. But we have a problem. I leaned forward in my chair, my hand tightening around my glass. Jerry. I knew the name. Gerald the Rat Rizzi, a disbarred lawyer who operated out of the back of a bail bondsman's office. He was the kind of man you called when you wanted to bury a problem, not solve it legally. "What kind of problem?" Jerry asked. I heard the flick of a lighter and the sharp intake of breath. Smoke filled the car interior, probably making Tiffany cringe, but she didn't complain. She needed him too much. "The old man," she said. "He isn't playing ball. I thought I could charm him. I thought I could play the sweet daughter-in-law and get him to sign the power of attorney voluntarily. But he is difficult. He is making us jump through hoops. He is humiliating us, Jerry. Today he made me cook pig intestines. He made Dante scrub the floor like a maid. He is laughing at us." Jerry chuckled, a wet, phlegmy sound. "Sounds like he has got your number, sweetheart. So what? You want me to send some guys to scare him?" "No," Tiffany snapped. "No violence. Not yet. He is high profile now. He was on the cover of the Business Chronicle. If anything happens to him physically, the cops will be all over us. And his sister, that witch Viola, she is watching like a hawk. We need to be smart. We need to be legal. Or at least look legal." "So what is the play?" Jerry asked, exhaling loudly. "Conservatorship," Tiffany whispered. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and toxic. "I want emergency temporary conservatorship, Jerry, ex parte, without him present. I want to walk into a judge's office tomorrow and walk out with control of his life." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Conservatorship. It was the ultimate weapon. It was civil death. It stripped a person of their rights to vote, to marry, to spend their own money, to choose where they lived. It turned a grown man into a child in the eyes of the law. Jerry whistled low. "That is a tall order, Tiff. You need grounds. You need proof that he is a danger to himself or others. You need to prove he is incapacitated. Just being an asshole father-in-law isn't enough. He is 72, Tiffany said, her voice gaining speed, manic and persuasive. "He was found homeless under a bridge, Jerry. We can use that. We can say he wandered off. We can say he has a history of dementia. We can say he is spending his money recklessly. He bought a $5,000 suit yesterday. He is delusional. He thinks he is a tycoon. He is a tycoon, you idiot," Jerry pointed out. "That is his money." "It doesn't matter," Tiffany shrieked. "If a doctor says he is incompetent, he is incompetent. If a doctor says he has Alzheimer's, then he has Alzheimer's. The judge won't look too closely. He is just another old black man who lost his mind. Who is going to care? His sister. We will say she is enabling him, that she is stealing from him too. We will paint ourselves as the concerned family stepping in to save him from predators." I closed my eyes. The racism wasn't even veiled anymore. It was a tool, a weapon she was ready to wield. She was banking on the system's indifference. She was banking on the fact that men like me were often overlooked, often dismissed. "You need a medical certificate," Jerry said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "A real one, or one that looks real enough to pass a clerk. And you need it fast." "I can't get him to a real doctor," Tiffany said. "He is too sharp. He passed a cognitive test last year with flying colors." "Then you need a dirty doctor," Jerry said, "and those cost extra." "I don't care what it costs," Tiffany said. "Put it on the tab. When we get control of the trust, I will pay you double. I will pay you triple. Just get me the signature." Jerry was silent for a moment, considering the risk versus the reward. "I know a guy," he said finally. "Dr. Evans. He lost his license in Florida for overprescribing Oxy, but he still has a valid stamp in Georgia. He is desperate. For 10 grand cash, he will sign a declaration stating he examined your father-in-law and found him to be in the advanced stages of dementia. He will say he is aggressive, paranoid, and unable to care for his own basic needs." 10 grand. Tiffany breathed. "Okay, I can get that. I will sell the jewelry. I will sell Dante's golf clubs. Just set it up. And once you have the paper, Jerry asked, what is the end game? Once the judge signs the temporary order, Tiffany said, her voice turning cold and flat, devoid of any humanity, we execute. We go to the penthouse with the order. We take control of the accounts immediately. We transfer the funds to a secure account that I control. And the old man, we move him, she said, immediately. We can't keep him at the penthouse, he is too visible. And I am not bringing him back to my house. I am done smelling him. So where does he go? Find a place, Jerry, she said. A facility, but not a nice one. I don't want to waste the money on premium care. Find one of those places in the boonies, a Medicaid mill, somewhere with locked doors and thick walls, somewhere where they sedate the patients so they don't make noise. You want to warehouse him? Jerry noted, sounding impressed by her cruelty. I want him forgotten, Tiffany hissed. I want him to disappear. I want him drugged up and shut away so I never have to look at his face again. I want him to rot, Jerry, for what he put me through today, for making me beg. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning white. This wasn't just greed, this was hate, pure, unadulterated hate. She didn't just want my money, she wanted my suffering. She wanted to punish me for having the audacity to survive her first attempt. She wanted to bury me alive in a chemical fog in a room that smelled of bleach and urine while she lived in my penthouse and drank my wine. What about the husband? Jerry asked. The son. Will he sign off on this? You need the next of kin on board. Tiffany laughed, a harsh barking sound. Dante. Dante will do what he is told. He is a broken dog, Jerry. I kicked him out of the car in the rain, and he probably thanked me for it. He is terrified of being poor. He is terrified of losing me. I will tell him it is for his dad's own good. I will tell him it is the only way to save the family. He will cry, he will whine, but he will sign. He always signs. I listened to the sound of my son being dismissed as nothing more than an obstacle, a signature to be coerced. It hurt almost as much as the plot against my own life. All right, Jerry said. I will call Evans. Have the cash by noon tomorrow. We can file the emergency petition by 2. You could be his legal guardian by dinner time. Do it, Tiffany said. And Jerry, make sure the facility is far away. I don't want any surprise visits. Don't worry, sweetheart, Jerry said. Once he goes in, he won't be coming out. People like him, they don't last long in those places. They give up. They fade away. Good, Tiffany said. That is exactly what I want. I heard the car door open again. Get out, Jerry. I have to go find some money. See you tomorrow, the lawyer said. Don't forget the cash. The door slammed. The car sat idling for a moment. I could hear Tiffany breathing deep, shuddering breaths. She wasn't crying. She was psyching herself up. It is mine, she whispered to herself, her voice a snake's hiss in the quiet car. It is all mine. She put the car in gear and drove off, heading toward a pawn shop or a fence, ready to sell whatever scraps of her life were left to buy the shovel for my grave. I took the headphones off. The silence of the penthouse felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with the weight of impending violence. They were coming for me. Not with guns, but with papers. Not with bullets, but with a gavel. They were going to try to steal my life using the very laws designed to protect it. I stood up and walked to the window. My reflection stared back at me, a man in a silk robe holding a glass of scotch, looking out at a city that was filled with wolves. They thought I was a sheep. They thought I was old and slow and ready for the slaughter. I picked up my phone. I dialed Marcus. He answered on the first ring. She is making her move, I said, my voice calm, deadly. Conservatorship. She has a dirty lawyer and a dirty doctor. They are filing tomorrow afternoon. I heard Marcus typing furiously in the background. We will be ready. Zeke, he said. We will have an injunction ready. We will have independent medical evaluations. We will crush this. No, I said. Marcus stopped typing. What do you mean, no? Don't stop them, I said. Let them file. Let them walk into the trap. But Sir Marcus argued, his voice rising. If a judge signs that emergency order, they can freeze your assets. They can have you detained. It is too risky. It is only risky if you don't own the judge, I said. There was a pause. Does Viola know the judge? I asked. Marcus sighed. It is Fulton County, Zeke. Viola knows everyone. Judge Hamilton is presiding tomorrow. She helped get him elected. Good, I said. Call Viola. Tell her to make a lunch appointment. And Marcus, yes, sir. Execute the buyouts. Tonight. I want to own Dante's mortgage. I want to own Tiffany's car note. I want to own the debt on her credit cards. I want to be the one they owe. It is already in motion, Marcus said. We bought the mortgage portfolio an hour ago. We acquired the car loan debt this morning. You own them, Zeke. You own the roof over their heads and the wheels under their feet. Excellent, I said. And one more thing, Marcus. Yes, get the projector ready, the big one, and set up the sound system in the main hall of the old house. The old house. Why? Because I said watching a plane blink across the night sky. Tiffany is going to want to celebrate her victory. She is going to throw a party. She is going to invite all her fancy friends to show off her new fortune. I took a sip of scotch, the liquid fire coating my throat, and I want to make sure the entertainment is to die for. The silence that followed the click of the recording was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like the pressure of deep water. I took the headphones off, slowly placing them on the mahogany desk with a deliberation that masked the tremors in my hands. My heart was beating a slow, thunderous rhythm against my ribs, a war drum calling for blood. Tiffany wasn't just greedy, she was evil. She had just laid out a plan to chemically lobotomize me, to strip me of my mind and my freedom, all so she could buy her way into a country club that would never truly accept her. And my son, my own flesh and blood, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, was going to let her do it. He was going to sign the paper. He was going to hand me over to the wolves, just to keep a roof over his head. I looked at the phone. The screen was dark, reflecting the distorted face of an old man who had finally run out of mercy. The easy thing to do, the safe thing to do, would be to call the police right now. I had the recording. I had the evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud, of elder abuse, of intent to harm. I could have a squad car at their door in 20 minutes. I could watch them being dragged out in cuffs, weeping and blaming each other. It would be justice. It would be clean. But I didn't want clean. I didn't want them to have the dignity of a jail cell. I didn't want them to be able to tell a sob story to a public defender about how they were desperate and misunderstood. I wanted to eviscerate them. I wanted to take the one thing they valued more than my life, more than their souls. I wanted to take their world. I picked up the phone and dialed. It was late past midnight, but Marcus answered on the first ring. He was young, hungry, and he knew that when I called, history was being written. Mr. Freeman, Marcus said, his voice alert, no trace of sleep in it. What is the move? They are filing for conservatorship tomorrow. I said, my voice low and rough like gravel. They have a dirty lawyer and a dirty doctor. They are going to try and freeze my assets at noon. I heard the sound of a chair scraping back the rustle of papers. I will have the injunction ready by morning, Marcus said, his tone shifting into legal combat mode. We will file a preemptive motion. We will get independent psychiatric evaluations. We can block this, Zeke. We can tie them up in court for years. No, I said. The line went silent for a heartbeat. No, Marcus repeated, confused. Sir, if we don't block it, they could temporarily freeze the accounts. It is a risk. Let them file, I said. Let them walk into the courtroom thinking they have won. Let them think they have the king in checkmate. I want them arrogant. I want them blind. Then what do we do, Zeke? We don't play defense, Marcus, I said, standing up and walking to the window, looking out at the city that I had helped build, the city that my son wanted to steal from me. We play scorched earth. I want you to execute the buyouts. Tonight. Right now. You mean the debt packages? Marcus asked, his voice dropping. Everything I said. I want it all. I began to list them, ticking them off on my fingers, each one a nail in their coffin. Dante's mortgage. It is held by a secondary lender because his credit is shot. Buy the note. Pay whatever premium they want. I want the deed to that house in my name by sunrise. Done, Marcus said, the sound of rapid typing filling the line. Tiffany's car, I continued. That white Mercedes, she drives like a tank. It is a lease, but she is behind on payments. Buy the contract. Buy the debt. I want to own the wheels she drives on. Acquiring it now, Marcus replied. And the credit cards, I said. All of them. The Visa, the Amex, the store cards she uses to buy clothes she can't afford. Find the debt collectors. Find the agencies. Buy the paper. I want every cent they owe to anyone in this world to be owed to me. Zeke, Marcus said, pausing for a moment. This is aggressive. We are talking about purchasing distressed debt at a premium. You are going to lose money on the transaction fees alone. I am not looking for a return on investment, Marcus, I snapped. I am looking for ownership. I am buying my son's life. What is the price tag on that? There was a silence, and then Marcus spoke, his voice filled with a dark kind of awe. The mortgage is $350,000. The car is $60,000. The credit card debt. Jesus, Zeke. They owe $120,000 in unsecured debt. They are drowning. Buy it, I commanded. Clear the board. I want to be the only name on their balance sheet. I want them to wake up tomorrow morning thinking the sun shines because I allow it. I listened as he worked. I could imagine the digital transfers, the packets of data flying through the fiber optic cables of the city, rewriting the reality of my son's existence. For years, Dante had thought he was independent. He thought he was a man, but he was just a tenant in a life he couldn't afford. He was a squatter in his own home. While Marcus worked, I poured myself a drink. I didn't drink it. I just held the cold glass against my forehead, trying to cool the fire in my brain. I thought about the baby boy I had held in my arms 40 years ago. I thought about the man who had looked me in the eye today and lied. "It is done," Marcus said, his voice breaking my reverie. "Tell me," I said. "The mortgage note has been transferred to the Phoenix Trust," Marcus reported. "You are now the lien holder on 452 Oak Street. The car loan has been assigned to us. We have purchased the rights to collect on 6 separate credit card accounts." He paused, taking a breath. "We also bought the outstanding loan on Dante's failed business venture from 3 years ago, the one he never told you about, the one he used the house as collateral for. He is in default, Zeke. Technically, you could foreclose on him 5 minutes ago." I closed my eyes. It was worse than I thought. My son wasn't just broke. He was destitute. He had dug a hole so deep he couldn't see the sky, and instead of asking for a ladder, he had tried to bury me in it to raise himself up. "Don't foreclose yet," I said. "Not yet. Let them have their morning. Let them file their papers. Let them have their little victory party," Marcus asked. "Tiffany will want to celebrate," I said, staring at the reflection of my face in the window. "She thinks she has won. She thinks she is the queen of Atlanta. She is going to throw a party at the house to show off. She is going to invite everyone she wants to impress." I took a sip of the drink, the liquid burning pleasantly. "And that is when we will strike," I said. "When the house is full. When the lights are bright. When she feels safe. I need you to prepare the foreclosure notices, Marcus. And the repossession orders. And the demand for full repayment of the unsecured debt. I want them printed on heavy bond paper. I want them in a red folder. I will have them on your desk by noon," Marcus promised. "Good," I said. There was a long pause. I could hear the hum of the servers in Marcus's office, the sound of money moving, of traps snapping shut. "Zeke," Marcus said softly, "do you realize what you have done?" "What have I done, Marcus?" I asked. "You don't just own their debt," he said. "You control their shelter. You control their transportation. You control their credit rating. You control their ability to buy a loaf of bread." He took a breath. "Sir, you own their lives." I looked out at the city, at the millions of lights, each one a life, each one a story. And in one of those dark houses, my son was sleeping, unaware that the roof over his head now belonged to the father he had betrayed. "I know," I whispered. "And tomorrow, I am going to collect the rent." The morning sun hit the glass walls of my penthouse with a brilliance that felt artificial. It was a beautiful day in Atlanta, but all I could feel was the cold steel of the trap snapping shut. Marcus stood by my desk, his face grim but satisfied. He held a document in his hand, fresh from the printer, the paper still warm. "They filed Zeke," he said, his voice low. "At 9:00 a.m. sharp, emergency petition for temporary conservatorship. They cited dementia, paranoia, and reckless spending. They included an affidavit from Dr. Evans claiming you are a danger to yourself." I nodded slowly, looking out at the city. They had done it. They had actually done it. My son and his wife had gone to a court of law and sworn on a stack of lies that I was insane just so they could get their hands on money they hadn't earned. It was the final betrayal, the last nail in the coffin of the relationship I had spent a lifetime trying to build. And the judge, I asked. Judge Hamilton signed the temporary order pending a hearing, Marcus confirmed. But he knows. Viola had lunch with him yesterday. He is playing along. He thinks it is a sting operation. Technically it is. So they think they have won, I said. They think they own you, Marcus corrected. As of this moment, legally speaking, they believe they have the right to control your assets, your movement, and your residence. They think the Phoenix Trust is their piggy bank. I took a sip of coffee. It tasted bitter. Good, I said. Let them celebrate. Let them feel the high. The fall is always harder from the top. As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was Tiffany. I let it ring 3 times, staring at the name on the screen. Daughter-in-law. A title she had forfeited the moment she left me in the dirt. I picked up. Dad? Her voice was breathless, high-pitched, vibrating with an adrenaline that she was trying to disguise as joy. Dad, you have to answer. Where are you? I am at the apartment, Tiffany, I said, pitching my voice to sound frail, confused. The old Zeke. What is it? Is everything okay? Okay. It is better than okay. It is amazing. You won't believe it. Dante? Oh my God. Dante got a promotion. I closed my eyes. The lie was so lazy. I had bought the logistics company Dante worked for 48 hours ago. I had instructed the CEO to give him a fake title, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, and a fake bonus just to grease the wheels of Tiffany's ego. A promotion, I asked, feigning surprise. But I thought he lost his job. He did. But they called him back. They realized they made a huge mistake, Tiffany gushed. They offered him a massive salary, Dad, and a signing bonus. We are going to be okay. We are going to be rich. She didn't mention that the rich part was supposed to come from stealing my trust fund. She was building a narrative where they were successful on their own merits, making it easier to justify taking control of my life. See Judge. We are successful people. We can take care of poor old Dad. That is wonderful, I stammered. I am so proud. We are celebrating tonight. Tiffany plowed on, her voice steamrolling over mine. We are throwing a huge party at the house, a gala. Everyone is coming. The partners from his firm, our friends from the club, everyone. And you have to be there, Dad. You are the guest of honor. Guest of honor. That was rich. She meant prisoner of honor. She meant prop. She wanted to parade me in front of her elite friends to show them her benevolence. Look at the poor old thing we took in. Look how good we are. And then when the applause died down, she would slide the guardianship papers in front of me and lock the door. I don't know, Tiffany, I said, hesitating. I am feeling a little tired today. My head is foggy. No, she snapped, then quickly corrected herself, softening her tone. No, Dad, please. You can't miss this. It is Dante's big night. He wants you there. He needs his father. Besides, we have a surprise for you, a big announcement. The announcement I knew was going to be my incarceration in a cheap nursing home while they moved into my penthouse. Okay, I said, sounding defeated. If Dante wants me there. He does. He really does, Tiffany chirped. Listen, don't worry about a thing. Just come over at 7. And Dad, don't wear that new suit you bought. Why, I asked, looking down at my midnight blue Italian wool trousers. It is a little flashy, she said. We want this to be about Dante, you know. Just wear one of your old suits, the gray one. You look so comfortable in that. She wanted me to look pathetic. She wanted me to look like the before picture in a makeover show. She wanted a visual contrast between her glamour and my decay. All right, I said. The gray suit. See you at 7. Love you, Pop. She hung up. The silence rushed back into the room. Love you. The words felt like slime. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the rows of bespoke shirts and silk ties. In the back, in a plastic dry cleaning bag, hung my old gray suit. It was polyester. It was shiny at the elbows. It smelled of dust and old spice. It was the suit of a man who apologized for existing. I pulled it out. I am going to wear it, I told Marcus, who was watching me with a raised eyebrow. You are going to wear that, Marcus asked. To the slaughter? No, I said, running my hand over the cheap fabric. To the theater. She wants a character. I will give her a character. I spent the next few hours preparing. It wasn't just about the clothes. It was about the mindset. I had to shrink. I had to dim the light in my eyes. I had to hunch my shoulders. I practiced in the mirror, watching Isaiah Freeman fade away until Zeke stood there again, confused, eager to please, frightened. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, to voluntarily put on the skin of the victim. But under the jacket in the inside pocket, I placed the red folder Marcus had given me. The foreclosure notices, the repossession orders, the debt acquisition papers. It was a heavy packet. It felt like a brick against my ribs. I also checked the small remote control in my pocket, the one linked to the audio-visual system Ray had hacked into at the old house. At 6:30, I called for the car, not the Rolls-Royce. That was too conspicuous. I called a regular town car service. I wanted to arrive quietly. I wanted to slip in like a ghost. As I rode through the streets of Atlanta, watching the city transition from the gleaming towers of Buckhead to the older tree-lined streets of my former neighborhood, I felt a strange calm settling over me. This was the end of the road. Tonight, the truth would come out. I thought about Dante. I wondered if he was nervous. I wondered if he felt any guilt at all. He was about to stand in front of his friends and lie about his father, lie about his success, lie about his life. He was building a castle on a foundation of sand, and I was the tide coming in. The car turned onto my street, the street I had lived on for 30 years, the street where I had taught Dante to ride a bike. It looked different now. Cars lined the curbs. Expensive cars, Porsches, Range Rovers, vehicles that belonged to people who had never worried about making rent. My house was glowing. Every light was on. Music spilled out onto the lawn, a tasteful jazz quartet that sounded nothing like the music I loved. There were people on the porch laughing, holding crystal flutes. The driver pulled up to the curb. "Here we are, sir," he said. I looked at the house. It looked like a stage set. It looked beautiful and rot-filled at the same time. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my jaw go slack. I summoned the confusion, the fear, the frailty. I opened the door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The night air was warm, but I shivered intentionally. I adjusted my old frayed tie. I clutched my cane like it was the only thing holding me upright. I walked up the driveway. No one looked at me. To them, I was just an old man in a cheap suit, probably a servant or a confused neighbor. I was invisible. Perfect. I reached the front steps. The door was open. Inside, I could see Tiffany holding court in the center of the room, wearing a white gown that sparkled under the lights. She looked triumphant. She looked like she owned the world. She spotted me. Her eyes lit up, not with love, but with the thrill of the hunter spotting the deer. She waved a frantic, beckoning motion. I took the first step. Tonight, I thought. Tonight, we settle all accounts. I walked into the lion's den, a lamb with a wolf's heart, and the door closed behind me. The party was a spectacle, a monument to Tiffany's vanity built on the ashes of my dignity. My old house, the one I had built with sweat and sacrifice, had been transformed into something unrecognizable. White silk draped every surface, obscuring the memories of my late wife and my son's childhood. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees like captured stars, and a string quartet played soft classical music in the corner, a stark contrast to the soul music that used to fill these halls. Waiters in white tuxedos moved through the crowd, offering champagne and canapes on silver trays. The guests were the elite of Atlanta, or at least the people Tiffany desperately wanted to be part of. They were the country club set, the old money, the people who looked at the world through a lens of privilege and exclusion. And Tiffany was in her element, floating among them like a white swan. She wore a white gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress sparkling under the rented floodlights. She fluttered from group to group, laughing too loud, touching arms, flashing her teeth in a smile that was all gums and ambition. Dante trailed behind her, a shadow in an expensive suit, holding a drink he was consuming too quickly, his eyes glassy and unfocused. And then there was me. They had dressed me in a suit that smelled of mothballs and neglect. It was an old gray polyester thing I hadn't worn in 20 years, dug out from the back of a closet where I used to keep my painting clothes. It was 2 sizes too big, the shoulders drooping sadly, the sleeves hanging past my wrists, covering my hands. It made me look small. It made me look frail. It made me look exactly like the charity case Tiffany needed me to be. I felt the itch of the cheap fabric against my neck, a constant reminder of the role I was playing. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh through the fabric. Her grip was iron, a stark contrast to the gentle facade she presented to the room. "Smile, Dad," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper near my ear. "Don't embarrass me. This is Dante Big Night. If you drool or say anything stupid, I will put you in the basement before the cake is cut." I looked at her, my eyes wide and watery, feigning the confusion she claimed I suffered from. "I won't embarrass you, Tiffany," I said, my voice raspy and weak. "I promise." She dragged me toward a group of women who were sipping champagne and judging everything around them with critical eyes. These were the gatekeepers, the women who decided who got into the club and who stayed in the parking lot. "Ladies," she announced, her voice pitching up into that fake, sugary tone that made my teeth ache. "I want you to meet my father-in-law, Isaiah. Poor thing. He has had such a hard time lately. His mind, you know, it wanders. We finally found him and brought him home." The women made sympathetic noises, looking at me with a mixture of pity and distaste, as if I were a stray dog that might have fleas. "Oh, how tragic," one of them said, clutching her pearls. "It is so good of you to take him in, Tiffany. Most people would just, put him in a facility. It takes a saint to deal with this kind of burden. Put him in a home," Tiffany finished for her, nodding solemnly, playing the martyr to perfection. "We thought about it, we really did. But family comes first, right? We are bringing him home to live with us so we can watch him 24/7. It is a sacrifice, but we are willing to make it. Dante and I believe in taking care of our own even when it is difficult." I stood there, stooped over my cane, letting my mouth hang open slightly. I watched them buy it. I watched them eat up her lies like they were the caviar circulating the room. They saw a benevolent angel rescuing a broken old man. They didn't see the wolf. They didn't see the shark circling the water. "Is he aware?" one of the women asked, talking about me as if I wasn't standing 2 feet away. "Some days are better than others." Tiffany sighed tragically, giving my arm a squeeze that was more of a pinch. "Tonight he seems calm, but we have to watch him. He gets aggressive when he is confused. That is why we have to take legal steps, to protect him from himself." She paraded me through the crowd for another hour. I was a prop. I was a conversation starter. I was the evidence of her goodness. Every time someone complimented her generosity, I saw her chest puff out. She was feeding on their admiration, getting drunk on her own deception. Dante stayed away from us. He was by the bar, refilling his glass over and over again. He wouldn't look at me. He stared into his drink, his face slick with sweat. He knew. Deep down, he knew this was wrong. He knew he was selling his father for a lifestyle he couldn't afford. But his spine had dissolved years ago, leaving only a hollow shell filled with fear and whiskey. "All right, Dad," Tiffany said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Let's get this over with so you can go rest. You look tired. You need your sleep." She led me to the head table, which was set up on a raised platform like a throne. A stack of documents sat waiting next to a massive floral centerpiece of white lilies. They were thick, official-looking papers bound with a heavy clip. "Just a few medical forms for his insurance," she told a curious guest who was eyeing the paperwork with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We need to make sure he gets the best care. The insurance companies are a nightmare. You know how it is. I knew what they were. They weren't insurance forms, they were guardianship papers. A voluntary surrender of all my rights. A legal declaration that I was incompetent and that she and Dante were the masters of my life and my money. It was a death warrant for my freedom signed in black ink." Dante shuffled over to the table. He stood there swaying slightly. He looked like he was about to be sick. Tiffany uncapped a heavy gold fountain pen. She shoved it into my hand, her touch cold and clammy. She pointed to the signature line at the bottom of the page where a yellow sticky note indicated where I should sign away my existence. "Sign here, Dad," she said, her voice tight with anticipation. "Right here." The music lowered. A hush fell over the immediate area. The guests turned to watch. They thought they were witnessing a touching moment, a family coming together to care for their elder. They were watching the saintly daughter-in-law care for the invalid. I took the pen. My hand trembled uncontrollably, a performance I had perfected in the mirror. I lowered the tip to the paper. Tiffany's eyes were wide, hungry, gleaming with a greed so pure it was almost blinding. She was vibrating with it. She was seconds away from owning me. She was seconds away from the $8 million she thought I had. She was seconds away from erasing me. I pressed the pen to the paper. A tiny dot of ink bled into the fiber. I could feel her breath held in her chest. I could feel Dante's terror radiating off him. I could feel the eyes of the room on my back. This was it. The moment she had been dreaming of since she saw my face on that magazine cover. The moment she won, or so she thought. The string quartet stopped playing mid-measure, leaving a hanging note that dissolved into the sudden hush of the room. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the grand hall, leaving a vacuum filled only with the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing against my skin. The chatter of the guests died down, rippling into silence from the front of the room to the back until the only sound was the hum of the expensive air conditioning and the jagged, terrified breathing of my son standing 3 feet away. I sat there in the oversized chair they had placed on the dais like a prop in a school play. The heavy gold fountain pen felt cold and alien in my hand. It was a Mont Blanc Tiffany had probably bought with my stolen credit card, a tool of luxury to sign away a life of hard labor. I let my hand tremble. It wasn't hard. The rage vibrating in my marrow made my muscles twitch involuntarily. To the crowd, it looked like the palsy of a senile old man. To me, it felt like an engine revving before the race. Tiffany stood over me, her shadow falling across the document. She smelled of fear and expensive perfume, a cloying mixture that made my stomach turn. She was vibrating with anticipation. I could feel the heat coming off her body. She was so close. She could taste the victory. She could see the bank balance in her mind's eye. $8 million. The country club membership. The respect she had chased her entire life but never earned. "Just right there, Dad," she whispered, her voice tight and strained, loud enough for the front row to hear, but quiet enough to sound intimate. "Just sign your name and we can get you some ice cream. You like ice cream, don't you?" She was talking to me like a toddler. She was reducing 72 years of manhood to a desire for sugar. I looked up at her through my lashes, playing the part of the confused invalid one last time. Her eyes were wide, manic, fixed on the paper. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking through me. She didn't see a person. She saw a signature. She saw a transaction. I looked past her at Dante, my son. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Sweat was beading on his forehead, rolling down his temple and soaking into the collar of his shirt. He looked like he was going to vomit. He knew what this was. He knew this wasn't insurance. He knew this was a conservatorship, a legal shackle that would bind me to their will until the day I died. He knew he was signing his father's death warrant. Dante. I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. He flinched. He looked at me, his eyes swimming with guilt and panic. "Help me, son," I said. It was his last chance. The final test. All he had to do was speak. All he had to do was say stop. All he had to do was be the man I tried to raise. But he didn't. He looked at Tiffany. He saw the glare she shot him, a look of pure venomous warning. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He looked back at me, and the light in his eyes died. "Just sign it, Dad," he muttered, his voice cracking. Just do what she says. It is for the best." The betrayal hit me harder than the cold of the pavement under the bridge. It was a physical blow, a punch to the gut. He had chosen. He had chosen the lie. He had chosen the easy way out. He had chosen her. I looked back down at the paper, the lines of text blurred. Incapacitated, ward of the state, transfer of assets. The words were black spiders crawling across the page, waiting to bite. I lowered the pen. The tip hovered millimeters above the signature line. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. The guests were leaning forward, a sea of white faces watching the spectacle. They thought they were seeing charity. They thought they were seeing a touching family moment. They had no idea they were watching a robbery in progress. Tiffany stopped breathing. Her hand hovered near my shoulder, ready to guide my hand if I hesitated, ready to force the ink onto the page. "Do it," she hissed under her breath, so low only I could hear. "Sign it, you old fool. Sign it, or I swear I will put you in the ground tonight." I pressed the nib to the paper. A single black dot of ink bled into the white fiber, spreading like a virus. Tiffany let out a tiny sound, a squeak of triumph. She reached out to turn the page for me, and then I stopped. The trembling in my hand ceased. The shake vanished as if a switch had been flipped. My hand became rock steady. The hand of a man who had poured foundations for skyscrapers. The hand of a man who had held a jackhammer for 10 hours a day. The hand of a man who built things that lasted. I lifted the pen from the paper, leaving only that single black dot. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of the house I had paid for. I sat up straighter. I rolled my shoulders back, shedding the weight of the frailty I had worn like a costume. The confusion drained from my face, replaced by a clarity that was cold and sharp as a diamond. Tiffany frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Sign the paper." I looked at the pen. It was heavy, expensive, useless. I looked at Tiffany. And for the first time in 3 months, I let her see me. I let her see Isaiah Freeman. I let the fire I had been hiding burn openly in my eyes. Her mouth opened slightly. She saw it. She saw the change. She saw the predator wake up. "Sign it," she commanded, her voice rising, losing its sweet facade. "Sign it right now." I didn't speak. I simply raised my hand, holding the pen up like a dart. I looked at the pristine white tablecloth, the expensive linen she had rented to impress her friends, and I threw it. I threw the pen with a violent, sudden motion. It spun through the air, end over end. It hit the table with a sharp crack. The casing shattered. Black ink exploded outward, spraying across the white cloth in a jagged, dark arc. It splattered onto the legal documents, ruining them. It speckled Tiffany's white gown like drops of black blood. She screamed, jumping back, clutching her dress. "You crazy old bat, look what you did. You ruined it." Dante jumped as if a gun had gone off. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like the room was suffocating. I didn't look at the mess. I didn't look at the ink. I looked at my son. I placed my hands on the arms of the chair. And I stood up. I didn't struggle. I didn't wobble. I didn't reach for the cane that was leaning against the table. I stood up with the power and grace of a man in his prime. I stood up until I was towering over Tiffany, until I was looking down at Dante. I reached up and loosened the tie of the cheap, oversized suit. I unbuttoned the jacket and shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor behind me. Beneath it, I wasn't wearing the stained undershirt of an invalid. I was wearing the custom silk vest of the midnight blue Italian suit, the fabric shimmering under the lights. I adjusted my cuffs, revealing the Patek Philippe watch, the diamonds catching the fire of the chandelier. The transformation was instant. The room rippled with shock. I wasn't Zeke the charity case anymore. I was Isaiah the tycoon. Tiffany stared at me, her eyes bulging, her face drained of all color. She looked from the watch to my face to the ink on her dress. She couldn't process it. The narrative in her head had just derailed and crashed. "Dad," Dante whispered, his voice trembling with a new kind of fear. "Dad, you are standing." I looked at him. My eyes were dry. My heart was a stone. I picked up the cane, the prop I had used to limp into their trap. I held it in both hands, and with a sudden snap I broke it over my knee. The wood cracked loud as a gunshot echoing through the silent hall. I tossed the pieces onto the table on top of the ruined papers. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at the guests. I looked at the lies they had gathered to celebrate. And then I spoke. My voice wasn't raspy. It wasn't weak. It was a boom, a thunderclap, a command from on high. No. The word hung in the air, vibrating with rage and authority. Tiffany took a step back, her hands trembling. What did you say?" I said. "No." "Tiffany," I repeated, my voice filling the room without a microphone. "I will not sign. I will not disappear. And I will not be erased." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a silk handkerchief, wiping the invisible dirt from my hands. "You wanted a show?" I said, stepping around the table, moving into the center of the room, the crowd parting before me like the Red Sea. "You invited all these people to watch the end of Isaiah Freeman." I turned to face her, my silhouette sharp against the lights. "Well, look closely, daughter, because the show is just beginning." I reached into the inside pocket of my tailored vest. The room flinched. For a split second, I think they expected a weapon. In a way, it was. It was a small, sleek, black remote control. I held it up, letting the light from the crystal chandelier catch the matte surface. "You went to a lot of trouble for this party, Tiffany," I said, my voice smooth and carrying to the back of the room without a tremor. "You rented the best linens. You hired the best caterers. You even set up this magnificent projection screen to show everyone a montage of Dante's imaginary successes." I pointed the remote at the massive white canvas stretched behind the head table. "It would be a shame to let it go to waste," I continued. "But I think the guests deserve to see a different kind of movie. A documentary, if you will." Tiffany's eyes widened. She lunged for me, her hands clawing at the air. "No, don't you dare!" But she was too slow. She was weighed down by her heavy gown and her fear. I pressed the button. The projector hummed to life, a beam of blue light cutting through the tension in the room. The screen flickered white noise, dancing for a heartbeat before the image resolved. It wasn't a montage of Dante receiving awards. It was a time-stamped security feed. November 14th, 10:15 p.m. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. The image was grainy, black and white, but the resolution was high enough to see the faces clearly. It was the feed from the street camera under the I-85 overpass. The room watched in stunned silence as my sedan pulled up to the curb in the desolate trash-strewn alley. They watched as the back door opened. They watched as Dante, wearing the same coat he had worn to work for years, dragged a limp, unconscious body out of the back seat. "That is me," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "That is the father they claim to love so much. Look at how gentle they are." On the screen, Dante dropped me. My head bounced off the concrete. A woman in the front row let out a small cry of horror, covering her mouth with a gloved hand. Then came Tiffany. She stepped out of the passenger side, looking around furtively. She wasn't rushing to help me. She wasn't checking my pulse. She was taping a piece of paper to my chest. I pressed a button on the remote, freezing the frame. I zoomed in. The handwritten note was pixelated but legible. "This man has Alzheimer's. Do not return him." Lies. I whispered into the silence. They drugged me. They drove me to a homeless encampment in the dead of winter, and they left me there to freeze or starve. I looked at the crowd, the socialites, the business partners, the country club, board members. Their faces were masks of revulsion. They were looking at Dante and Tiffany not as quirky social climbers, but as monsters. The veneer of civilization had been stripped away, revealing the rot underneath. "That is a lie," Tiffany shrieked, her voice cracking, sounding thin and hysterical against the weight of the evidence. "That is deepfake. He made it up. He hired someone to make it. It is AI. Technology can do anything now. Don't believe him." She looked around wildly, grabbing the arm of a man standing near the dais. "Tell them, Jerry. Tell them it is fake." But the man pulled his arm away as if she were burning hot. He stepped back, creating a distance between them. I pressed play again. The video ended with Tiffany dusting off her hands and laughing before getting back into the car. The screen went black. But I wasn't done. "Visuals can be manipulated, Tiffany," I said, stepping closer to her. "You are right. People might doubt a video. But the voice is the fingerprint of the soul, and you have a very distinctive voice." I pressed a different button. The speakers, which had been playing Mozart moments ago, crackled to life. This wasn't a video. It was an audio recording. High fidelity, crystal clear. It was the recording Ray had captured in her car just 2 nights ago. The sound of a car door slamming echoed through the ballroom. Then Tiffany's voice, loud and angry. "I just need that old man out of the house. He ruins everything. It is like living with a farm animal." The guests shifted uncomfortably. This was private. This was ugly, but they couldn't stop listening. And honestly, the recording continued, Tiffany's voice dripping with venom having him there. "It just looks bad. It looks low class. He sits on the porch in his undershirt drinking beer. He talks like he is from the ghetto." A murmur went through the crowd. The racial coding was subtle, but it was there. But I had saved the best for last. I skipped ahead to the conversation with her lawyer, Jerry. "I want him gone, Jerry. I want him in a home, a cheap one. One where they lock the doors and throw away the key. I want him to rot." And then the final nail, the slur, the word she had used when she thought no one who mattered was listening. "He thinks he is somebody just because his sister has money. He is just another N.R. who got lucky. I am going to take every dime and send him back to the gutter where he belongs." The word hung in the air, vibrating in the silence. It was a bomb. In Atlanta, in these circles, you could be greedy, you could be ruthless, but you could not be that kind of ugly. Not out loud, not where the money could hear you. The reaction was immediate and physical. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The guests recoiled. It was a physical wave of disgust pushing away from the head table. People turned their backs. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The waiters froze with their trays. Tiffany stood in the center of the dais, her mouth open, her face drained of all color. She looked like a statue of shock. She looked at the speakers, then at me, then at the crowd. She saw the judgment. She saw the doors closing. She saw her social life, her future, her very identity, incinerating in real time. "Turn it off!" she screamed, her voice tearing at her throat. "It is fake. It is a voice actor. He edited it. It is AI. I never said that I love him." She ran toward Dante, grabbing his lapels, shaking him. "Tell them, Dante! Tell them it is a lie! Tell them your father is crazy!" Dante looked at her. He looked at the woman who had driven him to ruin. He looked at the woman who had just used a racial slur against his own father, against his own heritage. For the first time in years, the fog in his eyes seemed to clear. He looked at her not with fear but with revulsion. He pulled away from her grip. He didn't say a word. He just stepped back, leaving her alone in the spotlight. Tiffany spun around facing the crowd, her hands out in a pleading gesture. "Please, you know me. We play tennis together. We chair committees. You know I wouldn't say that. He is framing me. He is a vindictive, senile old man who hates that I am white." No one moved. No one spoke. They just looked at her. The look in their eyes was worse than anger. It was absolute freezing contempt. She wasn't one of them. She never had been. And now she was something less than human. I watched her unravel. It was ugly. It was pathetic. But it was necessary. She had tried to use my identity, my race, and my age as weapons against me. She had tried to erase me. Now she was the one being erased. I pressed the stop button on the remote. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a dead silence, a silence that marked the end of things. I stepped forward, my shoes clicking on the marble floor. I walked up to Tiffany until I was looming over her. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my hand. I just looked at her with the cold, hard eyes of a man who has seen the bottom and climbed his way back up. "You called me a farm animal," I said quietly. "You called me a slur. You tried to bury me in a cheap nursing home." I leaned in close so only she and Dante could hear. "You wanted to prove I was incompetent. You wanted to prove I couldn't handle my own affairs. Well, Tiffany, I think I just handled this affair perfectly." She stared at me, her breathing ragged tears cutting tracks through her heavy makeup. She opened her mouth to speak, to lie, to scream, but nothing came out. She was broken. I turned my back on her. I looked out at the crowd. I apologized for the interruption. I said, my voice returning to the smooth, commanding tone of the tycoon. "I know you all came here to celebrate, but I thought it was important that you knew who you were celebrating with. I thought you should know who you were welcoming into your club." I adjusted my cuffs, the diamonds on my watch catching the light one last time. There is no Phoenix Trust for them. There is no inheritance. There is only the truth. And the truth is, these two people tried to kill me for money. I looked at the exit. I think this party is over. As I walked toward the door, the crowd parted for me. They didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with fear. They looked at me with respect. I was Isaiah Freeman, and I had just burned the house down. The silence in the ballroom was a living thing, a heavy blanket woven from shock and disgust that smothered every person in the room. The guests stood frozen, their champagne glasses halfway to their mouths, their eyes wide with the kind of horror usually reserved for car accidents. Tiffany stood center stage, stripped bare by her own voice, recording her racism and cruelty hanging in the air like smoke. Dante was a statue of misery beside her, his face slick with sweat, his eyes darting around as if looking for an exit that didn't exist. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. The movement was slow, deliberate, the motion of a man who has all the time in the world. I pulled out the red folder Marcus had prepared for me. It was thick, heavy, with the weight of their poor decisions. I walked to the table where the unsigned guardianship papers still lay stained with the ink I had spilled. I dropped the red folder on top of them. It landed with a dull, heavy thud that echoed like a gavel strike. "You wanted to talk about assets, Tiffany. You wanted to talk about management. You wanted to talk about who owns what." I opened the folder. The papers inside were crisp, official, and terrifying. I picked up the first document. It was a deed of trust stamped with the seal of the bank. "You thought you stole this house?" I said, my voice calm but carrying a razor edge. "You thought if you changed the locks and threw away my pictures, it became yours. But you forgot something, son. You forgot that ownership isn't about possession. It is about who pays the bills." I held the paper up for Dante to see. "This is the mortgage note for this house, Dante. $450,000. You haven't made a payment in 4 months. You are in default. The bank was getting ready to foreclose next week. But they didn't have to, because I bought the note." Dante's knees buckled slightly. He reached out to the table to steady himself. You bought the mortgage," he whispered. "I bought it yesterday," I said. "I paid cash. I am the bank now, Dante. I am the lien holder. And I am not interested in a payment plan." I dropped the deed back onto the table and picked up the next document. It was a vehicle title, And this, I said, turning to look at Tiffany, who was staring at the papers as if they were radioactive. This is the title to that white Mercedes you love so much, the one you leased to look like you belonged here. You are 3 months behind on that too. You have been dodging the repo man, parking it around the block so they wouldn't find it. Well, they don't need to find it anymore, because I own the debt. I stepped closer to her. She smelled of fear now, a sharp, acrid scent that cut through her expensive perfume. I own the wheels you drive on, Tiffany. I own the leather seats you sit on while you judge people who have less than you. I picked up the rest of the stack. It was a thick sheaf of papers stapled together. And this, I said, shaking the papers in her face. This is my favorite part. This is your consumer debt. The Visa, the MasterCard, the American Express, the department store cards, the personal loans you took out to pay for this party. I threw the papers into the air. They fluttered down like snow, landing on the table on the floor on Dante's shoes. $120,000 in unsecured debt, I said, my voice rising, filling the room with the magnitude of their failure. You are drowning. You have been drowning for years. You put on these clothes, you throw these parties, you act like royalty, but you are broke. You are destitute. You have nothing. I looked at the crowd. Every bite of food you ate tonight, every sip of champagne you drank, I paid for it. I bought the catering contract this morning. This isn't Dante's party. It is mine. I turned back to my son. He was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face, a low moan escaping his throat. Dad, why? He choked out. Why are you doing this? Because you tried to erase me, I said, cold as ice. Because you looked at me and saw a resource, not a father. You wanted my money so badly you were willing to kill me for it. Well, here is the money, Dante. This is what money looks like. It looks like leverage. It looks like power. And right now it looks like the end of your world. I leaned in close, my face inches from his so he could see the fire in my eyes. I am calling it in Dante. All of it. The mortgage, the car, the loans, the credit cards. I am calling the note. I want full payment, right now. Dante made a sound like a dying animal. He looked at Tiffany, pleading for her to do something to fix it, to tell him it was a lie. But Tiffany was staring at the papers scattered on the table. Her eyes were glazed over. Her brain was trying to process the catastrophe. We can't pay, she whispered. We don't have it. You know we don't have it. I know, I said. That is the point. I pointed a finger at the door. You have nothing. You own nothing. The clothes on your back, charged to a card I now own. The ring on your finger, bought with a loan I now hold. You are standing in my house, wearing my clothes, eating my food. You are trespassing in my life, Tiffany snapped. The reality was too much for her narcissism to handle. She couldn't accept that she had lost. She couldn't accept that the old man she despised had just bought her existence. She lunged for the table. Her hands were claws. She grabbed the mortgage deed, the vehicle title, the loan documents. She gathered them up in a frantic, jerky motion. No, she screamed, the sound tearing her throat. No, you can't have them. She started to rip the papers. She tore them in half, then in quarters, shredding them with a violent, manic energy. She threw the pieces into the air, clawing at the next document, ripping, tearing, destroying. It is gone, she shrieked, her eyes wild. The debt is gone. I ripped it up. You have nothing. It is over. The guests watched in horrified fascination. It was a complete breakdown. She was tearing up paper as if that would erase the digital reality of the bank transfers, as if destroying the copy would destroy the truth. I watched her. I didn't move to stop her. I stood with my hands clasped behind my back, my expression impassive. Those are copies, Tiffany, I said calmly, my voice cutting through her hysteria. The originals are with my lawyers. You can rip up every piece of paper in this house. It won't change a thing. The debt is digital. The ownership is recorded. You are just making a mess. She froze. Her hands were full of confetti. She looked at the shredded paper, then up at me. Her chest heaved. The realization crashed down on her. She had no power. She had no moves left. She dropped the torn paper. It fluttered to the floor, joining the rest of the wreckage. You monster, she whispered. You cruel, evil old man. I am the monster I asked. I didn't drug my father. I didn't dump him under a bridge. I didn't plan to lock him away in an asylum. I just bought what you were selling, Tiffany. And it turns out you were selling your soul for pennies. I looked at Dante. He was swaying. The color had left his face completely. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. Dad, he said, his voice thin and reedy. Dad, I... His eyes rolled back in his head. His knees gave way. He didn't stumble. He didn't try to catch himself. He just collapsed. He hit the floor with a heavy dead weight crumbling into a heap of expensive fabric and broken dreams. Dante, someone screamed from the crowd. I looked down at my son. He was curled in a fetal position, unconscious, escaping the reality he had created the only way his weak mind knew how. Tiffany stared at him. She didn't bend down to help him. She didn't check his pulse. She looked at him with pure disgust. "Get up," she hissed, kicking his leg. "Get up, you loser. Don't you dare pass out on me." He didn't move. I stepped over him. I walked up to Tiffany. She backed away until she hit the edge of the dais. She was trapped. "The party is over," I said. "The debt is due, and since you can't pay, I am taking the collateral." "Collateral?" She whimpered. "Everything I said. Get out of my house." "But Dante," she stammered, pointing at her unconscious husband. "The paramedics can pick him up from the curb," I said. I turned to the back of the room. The doors opened. Viola walked in. She wasn't smiling. She looked like a general entering a conquered city. Behind her were the police. It was time for the eviction. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a force that rattled the crystal in the chandeliers. It wasn't a polite entrance. It was an invasion. The sound echoed through the silent room like a thunderclap, snapping the guests out of their trance and turning every head toward the entryway. Viola stood there, framed by the door jamb like an avenging angel. She wasn't wearing the furs she had worn under the bridge. Tonight she was dressed for a funeral, or perhaps an execution. She wore a sharp black suit that seemed to absorb the light. Her silver hair pulled back tight, her face a mask of stone. She didn't look like a 75-year-old woman. She looked like a force of nature. She stepped into the room, her cane tapping a steady, ominous rhythm on the floorboards. Flanking her were two uniformed sheriff's deputies, their hands resting on their belts, their faces grim. Behind them stood the county sheriff himself, a man with a chest like a barrel and a reputation for zero tolerance. The crowd parted instantly. The socialites and business tycoons who had been sipping my champagne seconds ago scrambled to get out of the way, pressing themselves against the walls, their eyes wide with a mix of terror and thrill. They knew power when they saw it, and Viola Freeman was walking power. She walked straight down the center of the room, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the stares. She walked until she stood at the foot of the dais, looking up at Tiffany and the heap of unconscious man that was my son. Tiffany was trembling. Her hands were still clutching the shredded remains of the debt documents, her chest heaving. She looked at Viola, then at the police, then back at Viola. Who are you?" She stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "You can't just barge in here. This is a private party." Viola didn't even blink. She didn't raise her voice. She simply reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a copy. It was an original stamped with the seal of the Fulton County Court. "This is not a party," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, clear and cold as ice water. "This is a crime scene, and you are trespassing." She tossed the document onto the table. It landed next to the puddle of ink I had made. "I am Viola Freeman," she continued. "I am the trustee of the Phoenix Trust. And as of 12 o'clock this afternoon, the deed to this property was transferred to my brother Isaiah Freeman, free and clear." She pointed a gloved finger at me, then turned it back to Tiffany. "You have no lease. You have no ownership. You have no right to be here. You are squatting in a house that does not belong to you." Tiffany laughed, a frantic, hysterical sound that bordered on a scream. "Squatting," she shrieked. "I live here. My clothes are here. My life is here. You can't just kick me out. We have rights. We have tenants' rights." The sheriff stepped forward then. He was a large man, his presence sucking the air out of the room. He hitched up his belt, the leather creaking loudly in the silence. "Actually, ma'am," he rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly, "you don't. According to the paperwork, Mr. Freeman purchased the mortgage note. The foreclosure was processed today. This is an immediate eviction order signed by Judge Hamilton himself." He looked at Dante, still curled on the floor, then at Tiffany. "You are here illegally. And frankly, considering the evidence of elder abuse and attempted fraud I have seen tonight, you are lucky we aren't putting you in cuffs right this second." Tiffany looked like she had been slapped. She looked around the room, her eyes wild, searching for a lifeline. She saw the faces of the people she had courted, the people she had desperately tried to impress. Mrs. Vanderbilt. She cried, running toward a woman in the front row, a doyenne of Atlanta society. "You know me. We are on the charity committee together. Tell them this is a mistake, Mrs. Vanderbilt took a step back, her face twisting in disgust. She pulled her fur wrap tighter around her shoulders as if Tiffany were contagious. I don't know you, she said coldly. I know the woman you pretended to be, but that woman wouldn't leave her father-in-law to die under a bridge. Tiffany recoiled as if she had been burned. She turned to a man in a tuxedo, a banker she had bragged about knowing. Mr. Henderson. Please. You know Dante. You know he is good for it. Mr. Henderson looked at his shoes. He didn't say a word. He just turned his back on her, presenting a wall of black wool. One by one she tried. She pleaded. She begged. She called out names. But the room had turned against her. The herd had sensed weakness. The herd had sensed rot. They didn't want to save her. They wanted to distance themselves from the blast radius. They looked at her with the same contempt she had shown me for years. They saw her now, not as an aspiring socialite, but as a fraud, a grifter, a monster. She was alone. Completely and utterly alone in a room full of people. She backed away, stumbling until she hit the edge of the table. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with hate, but under the hate there was fear. Real primal fear. You did this, she whispered. You turned them against me. You turned them against yourself, Tiffany, I said, standing beside Viola. I just turned on the lights. Dante moaned on the floor. He was starting to stir, his eyelids fluttering. He pushed himself up groggily, looking around with confused eyes. He saw the police. He saw Viola. He saw the guests staring at him. What is happening? He mumbled, wiping drool from his chin. Get up, Dante, Viola commanded. Get off my brother's floor. Dante scrambled backward, crabbing away from her until he hit the wall. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad. He whined. Dad, please. Don't let them do this. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sat in the car while his wife taped a note to my chest. I am not doing anything, son, I said. The law is doing it. The sheriff checked his watch. He looked at Tiffany, then at Dante. You have 10 minutes, he announced, his voice booming through the hall. 10 minutes to gather your personal essentials, medicines, documents, 1 bag each. Anything left after 10 minutes belongs to the property owner. 10 minutes, Tiffany screamed. My clothes, my shoes, my jewelry. I have things, expensive things. You bought them with stolen money, Viola cut in. They aren't yours. They are evidence. But where will we go? Dante asked, his voice trembling. It is raining. We have no car. We have no money. That sounds like a personal problem, the sheriff said, crossing his arms. 9 minutes. The countdown hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Tiffany let out a shriek of pure rage. She didn't look at Dante. She didn't look at me. She turned and ran. She sprinted out of the ballroom, her heels clacking on the floor, hiking up her wedding dress as she dashed toward the stairs. She was going to save what she could. She was going to grab the pearls, the watches, the things she loved more than people. Dante sat there for a second, paralyzed. Then he scrambled up. Tiff. Wait, he yelled, running after her. Tiff, wait for me. They disappeared into the house, the sound of their panic echoing down the hallway. The sheriff motioned to his deputies. Go with them. Make sure they don't damage anything, and make sure they are out in 9 minutes. The deputies marched after them. I stood there in the silence that followed. The guests began to move. Quietly, awkwardly, they started to file out. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't make eye contact. They just wanted to leave. They wanted to go home and wash the feeling of this night off their skin. They wanted to forget they had ever clapped for Dante Freeman. I watched them go. I watched the room empty until it was just me, Viola the sheriff, and the ruined remains of the party. You okay, Zeke? Viola asked, touching my arm. I looked at the ink stain on the tablecloth. I looked at the empty champagne glasses. I am fine, Vi, I said. I am just waiting for the clock to run out. We stood there listening to the sounds of chaos from upstairs. We heard drawers being ripped open. We heard shouting. We heard the sound of a vase shattering. And then we heard the deputies shouting. Time's up. Let's go. Move it. I walked to the front door. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the end. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The rain had started again, a slow, steady drizzle that slicked the driveway. The air was cool and clean. I waited. And then they came. The heavy front door groaned as the deputies pushed it open, revealing a wall of water that seemed to be falling from the heavens, specifically to wash the stain of my son and his wife off my property. The rain was torrential, a cold, relentless sheet that turned the driveway into a river of mud and oil. It was the kind of rain that chilled you to the marrow, the kind of rain I knew intimately from my nights shivering under the concrete overpass while cars sped by overhead, oblivious to my existence. I stood in the dry warmth of the foyer, flanked by Viola and the sheriff, watching the final act of this tragedy play out. Dante and Tiffany stumbled over the threshold, pushed forward by the unyielding hands of the law. They hit the wet pavement hard. Tiffany's heel snapped. It was a sharp, sickening crack that echoed even over the thunder. She went down her knees, slamming into the puddle that had formed at the base of the steps. The white gown, the one she had worn to parade herself as the queen of Atlanta society, instantly soaked up the brown sludge, turning heavy and gray. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear anymore. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated fury mixed with the shock of the cold water hitting her skin. She tried to stand, but the weight of the wet fabric dragged her down. She looked like a swan drowning in oil. She clutched a Louis Vuitton bag to her chest, the only thing she had managed to grab in her 10 minutes of panic. It was stuffed with jewelry and watches, things she thought would save her, things she didn't realize were just cold metal and glass. Dante didn't fall. He just stood there, letting the rain soak him to the bone. His cheap suit, the one Tiffany had made him wear to look the part of the struggling son, clung to his frame, making him look even smaller than he was. He held a plastic garbage bag filled with clothes, his hands shaking so violently the bag rustled like dry leaves. He looked at the sky as if waiting for lightning to strike him down and end his misery. Then the fighting started. It was inevitable. When rats are trapped, they turn on each other. "You did this!" Tiffany shrieked, scrambling to her feet, one shoe on, one shoe off, hobbling in the mud. She shoved Dante hard in the chest. "This is your fault, you useless, spineless coward. You told me he was stupid. You told me he was senile. You said he would sign anything." Dante stumbled back, dropping his bag. Clothes spilled out onto the wet driveway, shirts and socks instantly ruined. "I did what you told me to do," Dante yelled back, his voice cracking. "I followed your plan. Tiff, I did everything you wanted. I drugged him for you. I dumped him for you. I ruined my soul for you, and you still aren't happy." Happy Tiffany laughed, a sound that was more like a bark. "Look at us, Dante. We are in the mud. We have nothing. The car is gone. The house is gone. My friends saw everything. I am ruined. I am a laughingstock. And it is because I married a loser. I married a man who can't even control his own father." She swung her bag at him, swinging it like a weapon. The heavy buckle hit Dante in the shoulder, making him wince. "I should have left you in Europe," she screamed. "I should have stayed with that waiter in Paris. At least he had a job. At least he was a man." I stood in the doorway, my hands clasped behind my back, watching them tear each other apart. It was ugly. It was visceral. It was the truth finally coming out. All the love, all the devotion, all the family values they had preached were just paint over rust. And now the rain was washing the paint away, leaving only the corrosion underneath. The neighbors were watching. Curtains twitched in the windows across the street. Porch lights flicked on. The people Tiffany had tried so hard to impress, the people she had looked down on, were now witnessing her total collapse. She saw them looking. She saw the judgment. "Stop looking at me," she screamed at the dark houses. "Stop it. You don't know me. You are all jealous. You are all nobodies." She was unraveling. The narcissism that had held her together was fracturing under the pressure of reality. Dante turned away from her. He couldn't look at her anymore. He looked at the house. He looked at the warm yellow light spilling out from the open door. He looked at me. "Dad," he whispered. He took a step toward the porch, then another. He fell to his knees again, crawling through the mud toward me, his hands outstretched. "Dad, please," he begged, the rain mixing with the tears on his face. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't mean it. She made me do it. I was scared, Dad. I was scared of losing her." I looked down at him. I saw the boy I had taught to tie his shoes. I saw the teenager I had taught to drive. I saw the man who had looked me in the eye and lied to me for 3 years. "You were scared of losing her," I said, my voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "So you lost me instead." "Dad, it is cold out here." Dante sobbed, his teeth chattering. "I have nowhere to go. Please just let me in. just for tonight. I will sleep on the floor. I will sleep in the basement. Please, Dad. I am your son. I remembered the note, do not return him. I remembered the feeling of the wind cutting through my thin jacket under the bridge. I remembered the hunger that gnawed at my belly while he ate steak in my house. You made your bed, son, I said. Now you have to sleep in the rain. But I will die out here, he wailed. No, you won't, I said. You are young. You are strong. You have 2 hands. You can work. That is what you forgot, Dante. You forgot how to work. You forgot how to survive. Well, tonight is your first lesson. I stepped back. I put my hand on the heavy brass handle of the door. Dad, no! Dante screamed, scrambling forward, trying to reach the steps. Don't close the door. Please don't close the door. Tiffany stopped screaming. She turned and looked at me, her hair plastered to her skull. Her dress ruined her face, a mask of black streaks. She didn't beg. She just stared with a hatred that could burn down cities. You will rot in hell for this, Isaiah, she hissed. I am already in heaven, Tiffany, I said calmly, because you aren't here. I looked at Viola. She nodded, her face grim but satisfied. Goodbye, I said. I pushed the door. It swung shut, heavy and solid. The latch clicked into place with a sound like a vault locking. I turned the deadbolt. The sound of the rain was muffled instantly. The screaming was cut off. The cold was gone. I stood in the foyer, surrounded by the warmth of my home. I looked at the closed door. I knew they were still out there, pounding on the wood, crying in the mud. But they felt 1,000,000 miles away. They were ghosts now. Ghosts of a past I had shed like a snake sheds its skin. I turned around. The house was quiet. The party was over. The mess was still there, the ink on the table, the broken glass. But it was my mess. It was my house. Viola put a hand on my shoulder. It is done, Zeke, she said softly. Yes, I said. It is done. I walked to the window and looked out through the blinds one last time. I saw the deputies ushering them off the property, pushing them toward the street. I saw them walking away into the darkness, 2 small figures silhouetted against the streetlights, soaking wet, broken, and alone. They were heading toward the city, toward the shelters, toward the bridges. I let the blinds snap back into place. I went to the kitchen and poured the expensive champagne down the sink. I didn't want it. I filled a glass with tap water, cool and clean. I drank it. It tasted better than any wine. I was Isaiah Freeman. I was 72 years old, and my life was just beginning. The calendar on the wall of the diner flipped to December. It had been exactly 30 days since the night the rain washed away my son's future. 30 days since I reclaimed my name. The city of Atlanta was gearing up for the holidays. Lights were strung on lampposts and store windows were filled with fake snow. But in a small, greasy diner on the outskirts of town, the festive spirit was dead. I sat in my car across the street watching through tinted windows. Inside, Tiffany was working. She wore a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big, stained with coffee and ketchup. Her hair, once her crowning glory, was pulled back in a messy, frizzy bun held together by a cheap plastic clip. She looked 10 years older. The Botox had worn off, the fillers had dissolved, and what was left was a face etched with bitterness and exhaustion. I watched as she balanced a tray of heavy plates weaving between tables. A customer, a man in a trucker hat, snapped his fingers at her, pointing at his empty coffee cup. The old Tiffany would have screamed. She would have thrown the cup in his face. But this Tiffany just nodded, her head lowered, and hurried to fetch the pot. She had learned. The world had taught her the lesson she refused to learn from me. That dignity is not a right, it is something you earn. Ray. My investigator handed me a tablet from the front seat. She was fired from her 3rd job yesterday, Ray said. People recognize her from the video. The internet doesn't forget Zeke. Every time she tries to get a job in an office or a boutique, someone pulls up the clip of her screaming racial slurs. She is toxic. This diner is the only place that would take her because the owner doesn't own a smartphone. I looked at her one last time. She was wiping down a table, her movements jerky and angry. She was alone. Her friends had blocked her number. The country club had banned her for life. She was exactly where she belonged, serving others instead of being served. Drive, I said. We moved through the city traffic, heading toward the warehouse district. On the corner of a busy intersection, a bicycle courier was stopped at a red light. He had a large square thermal bag strapped to his back and he was shivering in the damp air. It was Dante. He didn't see me. He was staring at the pavement, his breath coming in white puffs. He looked thin, gaunt even. The softness of his life had melted away, leaving a jagged, desperate edge. He was living in a motel room that cost $40 a night, sleeping on sheets that smelled of smoke and regret. He was delivering food to the kind of luxury apartments he used to live in, smelling the steaks and the pastas he could no longer afford. I felt a pang in my chest, a ghost of the love I used to have. But I killed it. I remembered the bridge. I remembered the note. I remembered that he had watched me freeze and done nothing. He was learning what it meant to be a man. It was a hard lesson, but it was the only one that would stick. The car pulled up to a large brick building in the heart of downtown. It wasn't a skyscraper. It wasn't a penthouse. It was solid, grounded, and permanent. A new brass plaque next to the door shone in the winter sun. The Freeman House. I stepped out of the car. Viola was waiting for me by the entrance. She smiled, and for the first time in years, her smile reached her eyes. "It is ready, Zeke," she said. We walked inside. The lobby wasn't covered in marble and crystal. It was warm wood and soft chairs. It smelled of coffee and baking bread. It smelled like safety. I didn't keep the $8 million. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't buy a private island. I bought this. I walked through the common room. It was filled with people. Old men with weathered faces, veterans who had been forgotten, grandmothers who had been evicted. They were sitting in armchairs, playing chess, reading books, talking. They were people who had been thrown away just like me. A man named Otis looked up as I walked past. He had been living in a bus station for 2 years before my outreach team found him. He stood up, his knees creaking, and offered me his hand. "Mr. Freeman," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. The bed, it is soft. And the door locks. I haven't had a lock on my door in a decade. That is what it was about. A lock, a key, the ability to close the world out and be safe. You are welcome, Otis," I said, shaking his hand. "This is your home. You take care of it." I walked through the facility. We had a clinic. We had a legal aid office to help seniors fight predatory families. We had a kitchen that served 3 hot meals a day. It was an empire of dignity built on the ruins of my son's greed. I reached the music room at the back of the hall. In the center stood a baby grand piano, a Steinway I had bought from an auction. It was black and sleek, a beautiful beast. I sat down on the bench. My fingers hovered over the keys. I hadn't played in 20 years. My hands were stiff, scarred from construction work and swollen from the cold nights under the bridge. But the music was still there. It lived in the bone. Viola leaned against the doorframe, watching me. "Play something, Zeke," she whispered. "Play something for us." I closed my eyes. I thought about the journey, the hard concrete, the betrayal, the anger, the revenge, and finally, the peace. I thought about Dante out in the cold on his bike. I thought about Tiffany wiping tables. They were part of the song too, the dissonant notes that made the melody resolve. I pressed the keys. A chord rang out, rich and complex. I played jazz. I played the blues. I played the sound of a man who had walked through the valley of the shadow of death and come out the other side holding a torch. The music filled the room. People wandered in, drawn by the sound. They stood quietly listening. I wasn't Isaiah the victim anymore. I wasn't Isaiah the vengeful billionaire. I was just Isaiah. I looked at Viola. She nodded. We had done it. We had balanced the scales. I finished the song, letting the last note hang in the air, vibrating with a finality that felt like closing a book. I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. I saw a police car drive by and I didn't flinch. I saw a luxury car drive by and I didn't feel envy. I felt whole. I had lost a son, but I had gained a purpose. I had lost a family, but I had built a community. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales. I learned that family isn't just about whose blood runs in your veins. It is about who stands by you when you are bleeding. My son and his wife thought my value was tied to my bank account, but they forgot that dignity is a currency that never devalues. By trying to bury me, they didn't realize I was a seed. I grew back stronger, richer, and wiser. Never let anyone, not even your own children, strip you of your self-worth. Because when you respect yourself, the world and karma will follow suit. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have forgiven them, or would you have done exactly what I did? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories to tell, more secrets to uncover. Until next time, stay strong and never let them forget who you are.